Tuesday, November 22nd, to order. Welcome, everybody. We're going to move right into consent agenda. I want to mention we are working from an amended agenda tonight, Council. The item number 6, there was a changed verbiage in item A and B. So that's the amendment to the agenda. Does Council wish to pull any item from consent? Hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve consent.
Move consent.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Fletcher.
Aye.
Barton.
Aye.
Wrong. Aye. Poirier.
Aye.
Trump.
Aye.
Moody.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, move to public forum. This is time we set aside for comments from the public on topics of city business other than those listed on the agenda. And ask people to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. Is there anyone who wants to address council? David.
Oh my gosh.
Hello, Council. David Martin, Bismarck, North Dakota, 339 Hickory Drive. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I come here tonight to thank you for the work that you've been doing. And in particular, I want to give you a big hand for the work in the climate action plan. I thought the workshop was very informative, and the staff just knocked it out of the park, I think, with their report and the way that they are engaging the really complex questions that are going to come before you, and it's going to be hard to decide how to deal with them. But I just love how seriously everyone is taking it, and I think that's great. Yeah, as you know, I've communicated with you about various topics throughout this past year, and I appreciate the responses that I've received. I have to say, though, that sometimes, not everything is getting the same traction. There's a topic that no one has responded on, and I'm a little concerned about it. And I figure, maybe I can come before you and. Well, it's a long drive, okay? but I wanted to bring this to your attention and see, maybe one of you will respond to this, because I think it's something that we need to deal with. And I don't know how many times you've received this email, okay? But I think the best way to communicate this is just to read it to you and give you a chance to think about this, okay? Dear Mayor Council, could you please spare a minute to assist me in completing a task discreetly? I would be glad to receive your response through email because I'm presently in a meeting. So if one of you could just pick that up sometime and let me know, that'd be great. A gift card would sort this out. There are many ways to deal with this. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Bye.
You might explain the context of this, that we're
Yeah.
always getting these emails purportedly from you asking for assistance when you're in a meeting.
Text messages.
Yeah.
Well,
So for those of you who are
I'm
wondering what that
I'm
was about, that's what that was about.
a needy person. I'm sorry. So. my email gets hacked a lot. So anyway, for those that may not be aware, that was former city council member David Martin and a
The levity.
Bill Levity. Appreciate him appearing. All right, Richard.
Richard Dale, 505 8th Street, apartment number 2. Despite, I have some problems with the city of Ames doing things like with the climate action plan, because it is sort of like a international sort of thing. And I think that there are more things that are more important, like the oath of office. You know, or you know, that's in the Constitution, and I it's just a bunch of words.
Anybody else want to address council under public forum?
Grant Olson, 3812 Ontario Street. Harvest is concluding, and this week we will gather at tables to share in the bounty of the farmers' efforts. Today's modern farm equipment can give a farmer a detailed look at how different regions of a field are performing. This portion over here has a higher yield than maybe this rectangle over here. A similar map a yield map has been produced for Ames, and it shows that the highest tax revenue per acre is concentrated in 3 areas, and you might guess what those are: downtown, Campus Town, and Somerset. These 3 regions of Ames are subsidizing the rest of town. The higher density areas of Ames are subsidizing the lower density single family housing. When the city builds out, turning green field to pavement, it affects the watershed, and it also affects the city's balance sheet. More money is spent on streets, the one-time cost, the maintenance throughout the year, and the periodic reconstruction costs. Let's say I waved a magic wand and added 1 floor to every residential building in Ames. Okay, every home, every apartment building got 1 floor taller. The city would not have to install more pavement. Fire response times stay the same. Ride routes do not have to be lengthened. Those are just 3 of the benefits. So, as in, say, an analogy for a city versus a human body, usually it's better to grow a little taller and stronger, not wider, and we'll be more fiscally responsible as a result. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, close public forum. Move on to item number 18. Motion approving denying renewal of Class C liquor license with outdoor service and Sunday sales outlaws. And Mark's going to make a few comments before Chief Huff commences with his presentation.
Yeah, I just want to start off by saying that as I've talked to you about before, that there are some times when the council does engages in actions that are considered quasi-judicial. It's you're acting more like a judge or a court than you are a legislative body or administrative body. So, so this item is on the agenda. Was placed on the agenda, and then I hadn't really thought about it, but over the weekend I got an email from a council member asking me if this would be considered quasi-judicial. I took a look at some of the Iowa Supreme Court precedents really quickly. It seemed to fit the criteria that are listed in the Iowa Supreme Court decisions as to when a city council is acting in a quasi-judicial manner. So I gave the advice that it is this would be a quasi-judicial matter, and that therefore the council should not engage in ex parte communications, which are ex parte means one-sided, where you're just talking to one side. Of course, that advice came out late because it was Sunday night when I was reading my email. And then I know that there had been some communications from the representatives of Outlaws with council members before that. And that's okay. Again, I hadn't given that advice, so that's okay. Under Iowa law, the way to cure a ex parte matter instance is to just simply put it on the record that it happened. And so I'm just here to make a record of that there were some council members who had received or who had discussed this with the representatives Outlaws. It's not a bad thing. It's just something that happened, and putting it on the record cures it under Iowa law. So anyway, I'm just here to say that. And I know Mr. Teresi, representing Outlaws, disagrees with me that
I didn't say that.
you said it to me. but and that's okay. Reasonable minds can disagree. So anyway, so we're proceeding as if it's quasi judicial at this point, and we've taken care of the ex parte concerns. So thank you.
Chief?
Okay, I'm here tonight to discuss the liquor license renewal for Outlaws at 2522 Chamberlain Street here in Ames. So you have a report in front of you. It's a little lengthy, but I'm going to go over some of the high points. So first of all, we conducted a compliance check at Outlaws on March 25th, 2021. And just as a reminder, a compliance check is when we take a minor to the establishment and attempt to purchase alcohol to ensure that the license holder does not make that sale to an underage person. Unfortunately, on March 25th, an employee did sell alcohol to the underage person during that check. We did a follow-up compliance check on October 20th, 2022, so just about a month ago, when an employee again sold alcohol to a minor. So this is the second violation within 2 years, and Iowa Code 12353B prescribes a 30-day suspension and $1,500 fine. So that's all in code. That's going to happen no matter what. In addition to the failed compliance checks, in the previous 12 months during the renewal period, Ames officers have cited 15 underage individuals for being on premises underage, under the age of 21. Of those 15, officers were able to verify at least 6 used a fake ID to get entrance into the bar. 2 other individuals, however, stated they were let in because they knew staff members of the bar. And it's worth noting that of the remaining individuals, we don't know if they had a fake ID or how they gained entrance into the bar, just that they were there. Sorry. In addition to the 2 compliance check failures and the on-premises citations, we also received information from an ex-employee who provided us some text messages and some other documents that are very troubling. In one case, there is a direction from the manager to the Outlaws employee group, and I'll just direct you, it's on page 4 of the report, number 3, which says, "No minors let in unless I am asked." Obviously, the number one thing you don't do when you have a liquor license establishment is you don't let minors in underage. When asked, that particular employee said that what he meant was that if a minor attempted to get in, that he would be contacted and then he would make sure that they didn't enter. I personally do not believe that explanation. Doesn't sound right. And it's also not supported by some of the other documents that are included. We met with we met with the license holder and the attorney on November 9th at the request of the license holder. And at that meeting, the license holder said that when they found out about these issues, that they reassigned the manager to a different liquor license establishment owned by Mr. White. They also said that they have a new manager since that time, and the problem has been corrected. So they're essentially saying that they realized they had a problem, reassigned that manager, hired a new manager, and have fixed the problem. However, I would also state that it's clear that minors were still found on premises after that time, some in possession of a fake ID and some we don't know. In addition, staff meeting minutes described above that we talked about. There are some text messages from the manager to this ex-employee that appear to have code words embedded in the text message. At the November 9 meeting between the license holder and city staff, we asked what those code words were about, and the response was they could have been some sort of VIP status code word. However, there's no mention of any kind of VIP status in any other text message that I've been able to see. Again, I'll direct you to page, and I got to put these on to read them. On page 15 of the report, I've marked a few. So the examples of these text messages are Kylie has 4 people with her that are okayed. The password for Carson's people is white. Madison has 2 coming and Justin has 1. That's all that's allowed tonight. Code word outlaws. When asked if they need to be checked or just do they still have to pay cover, the response is they still have to pay cover, meaning cover charge to get in, but not necessarily check for ID. I would also direct a few on page 16 of the report. Again, Alyssa has 2 with her. After this week, we're going to stop letting all these people in. And the question about that, the question is if the officers are starting to get serious, and the response is that the cops can get serious at any time. So those are troubling. I don't know what the explanation for them is. It appears to be a code word to let people in. So if the city council denies the requested license renewal, denial then can be appealed first to Alcoholic Beverage Division, or ABD, then to administrative law judge, then the director of ABD, and then district court would be the next remedy in that series. The filing of the appeal with ABD places a stay on the denial and they continue to operate. If the appeals are not successful, alcohol may not be sold on premise for 1 year or until a new license is applied for and granted. So before you deny it, you have 3 options. One is to deny the application for a 12-month liquor license renewal. If that alternative is approved, the establishment will still be subjected to the fine and the suspension by the state of Iowa as code prescribes. You can approve the 12-month liquor license renewal. In that case, also, the establishment will still have the fine and the 30-day suspension from Alcoholic Beverage Division. And then you could deny the application for a 12-month renewal, but entertain a future application at some point for an 8-month renewal, should it be applied for and should it come before council. And again, with this alternative, the establishment will still be subjected to the 30-day suspension and fined by the state of Iowa at some point during that renewal period. So to finish off, in order to comply with a compliance check, the business simply needs to ask for an identification and make sure the person is of age. The applicant Outlaws has failed 2 of these compliance checks in less than 2 years, 1 within the renewal period and 1 in the last renewal period. They've also had 15 of those citations for minors on premise within the renewal period. Some had a fake ID. Some said they knew somebody and were let in, and others we don't know. Most troubling, however, it appears that the employees colluded to allow underage patrons into the establishment. To me, that is the worst part of this, is that it appears that the employees were not doing the one thing you're not supposed to do, and that's let minors into a bar. And for that reason, I recommended that we not renew the 12-month liquor license, or option number 1. Take any questions if you have them.
Any questions?
So I think you just touched on this at the end, but last week on our consent agenda, we approved a renewal for AJs, who also had 15 citations in the last 12 months. And I'm guessing that you're going to say this one is different because of the way the employees seem to be involved in.
Yeah, I think it's a combination, it's totality here. So there's the compliance check issue. There's the minors on premise in this case, minors who actually said they knew somebody and that's how they got in, and the additional information about the employees colluding using text messages to allow people in.
And then this might be a better question for the applicant, but I mean, Outlaws has been in business for a long time,
Yes.
and you guys have been doing, you've been in there obviously many times over the years. What has changed in the last 12 months or 18 months? Yes, in
So-
your opinion.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know if this is something that has gone on for a long time and we've just not been aware of it. This was brought to us by an ex-employee. I believe will be described as a disgruntled ex-employee, but still information that appears to be accurate. So I don't understand either what happened, but it seems to be more than just one employee that was involved in it. Again, the applicant at our November 9th meeting did say that they corrected the problem by reassigning that particular manager to fix the problem. But again, I would point out there were additional citations written for on-premise after that as well.
Okay.
I know I've said before, this is the one business where you have people actively trying to thwart your efforts to keep them out. And that is a difficult position to be in. There's fake IDs that are very good. There are fake IDs that aren't so good. But certainly the difference here is any kind of collusion to let minors in.
So the compliance checks, the reason that these are so far apart is that because ABD kind of schedules them and manages that.
Sometimes. So we work with ABD most of the times to do compliance checks and sometimes even work with us.
Mhm.
And in this case, we did a series back in 2021 in March or so. And we did another round, it was a little bit more than a year later in October. And they certainly weren't the only people that failed those compliance checks.
Mhm.
But yeah, as a general rule, we work with them.
So if an establishment maybe fails a compliance check, they're not getting checked again more regularly to see if it's a continuing problem. It's just kind of when ABD and you are able to do those.
In the case where a compliance check is failed, we normally do try and do a follow-up
Mhm.
just to see if the initial, again, fine from ABD, maybe a suspension from ABD corrects the problem. So a lot of times we do a follow-up. And we don't have to have ABD with us to do a follow-up. We can do it whenever we want,
Mhm.
but it is an operation. It takes, hours to do and
Mhm.
all the things that go along with that.
So I have a question about the minors who you interviewed, and they said that they were able to go on the premise without a fake ID, that someone allowed them in. Could you tell us a little bit about that? How many of these minors were there?
So of the 15 that were cited for on-premise, we only found 2 that admitted that's how they got in. And that's just an admission from them. And we don't really have a way to verify that either way. But that's what they said they did to get in. We can't always determine if a minor had a fake ID or not. So in 6 cases, we were able to verify they actually had a fake ID on them. In 2 of those cases, they didn't have a fake, but said they were let in by someone they knew. And then the balance of those cases, we just don't know. We don't know how they got in.
Okay. And I'm curious about the recommendation. One of the things that we strive to do in these situations is to be consistent. So we want to treat like establishments the same when there's a violation. And could you speak to us about why you feel like this is consistent? We don't have examples in front of us of other sanctions. Could you just help us understand why you think this is an appropriate sanction here?
Sure. I think we've had liquor license renewals come up before with this number of citations, maybe even a failed compliance check. I think that's just come up. However, I have never in my career seen the employees colluding to let minors in. And I've been doing this 28 years, and I actually spent 1 complete year that all I did was liquor license enforcement, and I never saw that then either. So for me, it's difficult for me to make a recommendation other than no renewal. when employees are actively working against the system that's put in place to keep minors out of the bar.
Okay. And my final question, the other thing we think about is the impact as a precedent. So other establishments are watching what we do here tonight. And so help us think through what, from an enforcement perspective, how would you want that to be in our mind as we deliberate this evening?
My biggest concern is that this is a wider spread problem than just this one establishment. So my concern is that maybe a number of establishments might be doing this very same thing, because this is the first time that we've seen it. So it's possible that this could have been going on for quite some time at a lot of places. And I want to make sure that that's not happening.
And so do you anticipate increasing the efforts to do these checks on establishments?
So staffing has made it less frequent for officers that are just out doing the normal bar checks. As our staffing improves, you will see officers in the bars doing more of those checks on a more regular basis. But we had, 10 openings for quite a while where we just had to draw back on some of those types of activities. So regardless of this, you're going to see more officers out making sure that there's better compliance. But that doesn't mean that we will catch things like this. We don't have access to text messages. The only reason we have these is because an ex-employee came forward and provided them to us.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Anita, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
All right, open up public comment. Floor is open. Does anyone want to address council on this topic? You introduce yourself and your address, and then you may proceed.
Good evening, council. My name is Andrew White. My address is 3315 146th Circle in Urbandale. I am the licensee of Outlaws and meeting here this evening on the absolute worst circumstances that I can think of. I heard what the chief had to say. I would agree that in my 30 plus years, I've never seen text like that either. I guess anything I feel like I say may sound like excuses or trying to justify, excuse, or explain. I have no excuses. I have no explanation. I was blindsided by what I saw in July is when I was first made aware of these texts. I didn't see all of them until last night, actually, when I saw the agenda. But the texts that I received in July were shocking, eye-opening to me. The person that engaged in sending those texts worked for me for 10 years, was probably the employee that I had the most trust in, the most, gave the most responsibility and depended on the most to oversee not just this one business at a time, but a lot of different parts of the business, inventories and repairs and maintenance, and getting up 8 a.m. if you worked 4 a.m. the night before to get back down there to let in delivery, repair, anything. And the one person that I would have probably guessed would never do something like this is actually, unfortunately, the person that did it. When I found out in July, I sat down, Casey Walters, who's here tonight, I sat down with Casey, showed him the text that I had received, asked him you can imagine what the F was this. We spent maybe 45 minutes. I listened to his explanation, didn't buy most of it. Eventually, he admitted what had happened, doesn't really know why he did it. There was no incentive to do it. I think, I had a choice to fire him, which should have been done, could have been done, it would have been justified. And I decided after 10 years and feeling like this was a person that I felt had made a horrible mistake, but my words to him, how I felt, how he let everybody down and how he let me down, I felt what I did to him was actually probably maybe more painful to him than just firing him. I made the decision in July to keep him. He had been removed already from Outlaws a few months earlier and was back to where he kind of started, which is another bar, Sips and Patties, that I own. And I was very confident in July after that meeting that he was remorseful, embarrassed, ashamed, and was most likely never to do anything like that again. I still believe that today. And I think it's the report I got on Sips and Patties, there's been a total of 2 violations in a year of minors. That's a tiny number for how much volume comes in and out of that bar in a year. But I can't excuse what he did, when he did it. I don't know why. He doesn't really know why either. I'm here tonight to say, it's my license. I take responsibility. He works for me. Things were done I was not aware of. When they were done, doesn't excuse anything. I gave Casey a second chance. Worked for me a long time, and I still believe in him. And I'm asking, the license has been in place 18 years. I've never stood here on behalf of this license and had to try to get it reinstated or it was possibly getting, nothing has happened 18 years. But it's been a bad year, a horrible year. The first to admit it, it's unacceptable. I've made a lot of changes, and I think part of it is just philosophically to understand that somebody I never thought could do something did it. And now I have to kind of think differently on how I approach everything to try to make sure even the people that you think are above reproach are apparently subject to making these kind of mistakes. So as a result, I've made a lot of institutional changes at all of the businesses, trying to prevent not only slip-ups by door people or bartenders, but probably more importantly, managers at the highest level who constantly are instructed, lectured, threatened with their jobs, et cetera, to make sure their people are complying. But when they're not complying, obviously, that's the beginning of the chaos that happened. I'm here to say in 18 years, I think the license has been free of, I haven't had been arguing for it or anything. It's been in a good place. It's been a horrible year. I found out about it. I believe it's corrected. It's a correctable problem, and the intensity has been turned up to make sure we can never be in this kind of situation again. I have a list of changes that I've implemented, including with some advice on having employees required to report if they've been asked to or seen any illegal or unathletic activity. If they witness anything or asked to do it, they're required to report it directly to me, anonymously through email. And if they don't, they'll be considered part of it as well. But a lot of that's trying to prevent something that I did not foresee, even in my long years in business, that essentially an insider could do something that he knew was to be against the rules. So I'm here to ask for a second chance for Outlaws. I understand how bad it messed up, but I also truly believe it's been repaired and can be continued to be repaired even more, and will never be an issue again. That or any of my licenses. This has kind of opened my eyes to another area that I did not foresee could happen. Casey Walters on his own volunteer came tonight to speak on his behalf if need be. But again, I'm here to ask for a second chance for Outlaws.
Thank you. Anybody else? Does anybody else who wants to address council?
Brian Teresi, Denton Davis Brown, 120 South 6th Street, Ames, South 16th Street, Ames, apologize. You guys know me, I've been here before. I've never been under here under these circumstances because I'm not up here tonight to make a legal argument to you. I know we have fun doing that, but this is just a common sense reasonableness issue. 18 years, no issues. 10-year employee, hard worker, nice guy. He gave him a second chance. Andy came up here, expressed his contrition and concern, and I believe that Ames, especially, I mean, I've seen things happen over the last 10, 15 years or so that we believe in letting people cure things, letting people fix things. You know, giving people a second chance to show that what happened was an outlier. So I'm hoping, and we're hoping, that as part of your deliberation tonight, you guys all take that into account and decide to give outlaws. And again, there's no legal. We're not saying none of this stuff happened. Andy came up and said all of it happened. It was bad. Took him, blindsided him. But to put a 18-year business out of business without giving them the opportunity to fix it and to show that that's not the way this business or his other bars operate or operated, just doesn't seem very fair. Not just as an attorney, but as a citizen. The police especially, they believe in rehabilitation and restitution. So we're asking that you go forward with option 3 for an 8-month license for outlaws to let Andy show that this situation is cured and taken care of and will never happen again. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was banned from taking off my clothes
Richard, this
all
item,
year about getting the door for people. And
anybody else that wants to
I
address?
have this T-shirt that says, "Please ask."
Richard needed to make comments on this item only. Anybody else want to address council on this topic?
Hello, my name is Michael Schwab. My address is at 129 Main Street, Ames, Iowa. I'm the ex-employee referenced in the text messages. So these events are not an outlier. The only outlier is that someone came forward and they're getting caught. The entire about little under 2 years that I worked here, it's been going on. In fact, the licensee holder has been made aware about this in February and back and forth phone calls. And in the meetings I had with manager Casey Walters, they've actually retaliated against me, banning me, saying they would only unban me if I agreed not to speak about these issues, not just here, but in general. So bars do not train their bouncers. They really just assign you a door and say good luck. For working door, I had to buy my own ID training book. I've had to buy my own UV light. I had to go out of my own way to seek training. It was definitely within my incentive to take IDs. That was the only way I got paid. And if underage person was called in the bar, they would refuse to pay me any tip out. This was only unique to me. It was general practice that management, not just Casey Walters, but other managers would let in underage staff as well as their underage friends. I've had managers order me to let in everyone before 11. And then when I refused, I was scheduled after 11 p.m. I've sent you all emails about emails on the schedule on the first sting where the manager just left the door unattended. And that's why, while he was supposed to be working door, or someone was supposed to be working door, he was playing pool. I do not think that moving Casey to another bar fixes the problem. It just expands it to another bar. In those 2 years, I could look at hundreds of photos of underage staff and their friends being in bars. It's not uncommon to see them there. It's less of that it's happening. It's just they're not getting caught for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, if I could ask a follow-up question. So, Mr. Schwab, thank you for coming tonight, and certainly takes a certain amount of courage to come forward and reveal information that's sort of hard to talk about. But Mr. White has really, his defense is that he was not aware of this activity, and therefore he should be given a second chance. And could you clarify for council the degree to which Mr. White was aware of allowing underage patrons into the Outlaws establishment?
So text messages refer to December 17th incident. I've met with the manager a few times to try and work it out with him. I've also called the licensee holder, Andy White, multiple times in February after. I did not get a response until I told him that I'd be escalating the situation to bring it before you, and that's the only time I got a response from him. I've had multiple back and forth calls that in total probably lasted upwards of 2 hours going over the events and some of the problems I've been having. He was made detailedly aware. For their response that minutes of the meeting referred to the manager saying that he was the only one that could tell underage kids that they weren't allowed in the bar, I highly refute that. I was there to the in-person meeting, and he was more clear that they were going a little stricter than letting everyone in without permission, and that he would need permission.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anybody else? Does anybody else? Go ahead. Does anybody else wants to address council? Mr. White?
Thank you. I just want to clarify a few things. That's the first time I've seen Michael Schwab. Number one, he contacted me in February. That's true. And as he says in his text that you'll see later that he sent to me in July, he called me February 16th and explained to me that an incident had happened in December where a girl that he knew to be underage got in. He'd called Casey Walters, said the girl was trying to get in. Casey Walters said she's old enough. Schwab said, no, I know she's not. This went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Eventually, Casey overruled him, told him to let her in. That's what I was told in February. Based on that, I said, all right, well, let me call Casey and see what he says. Called Casey, kind of went back and forth. Long story short, it was my understanding that Casey didn't know how old she was or approved it without knowing, which made no sense to me since he wasn't there. And I told him so and said, I don't know what you're thinking, not being there and overruling an employee who's standing there with the ID, why you would tell him to let her in. And he didn't have much of an answer, reprimanded him at the time, and that's when he was removed as outlaws kind of overseeing it. There was a new manager in place by the time. The incident had happened in December, so there wasn't, it was 2 months earlier that I was made aware of one girl that got in. And his own text to me that you can see dated July 16th, he says in that text, I contacted you about one incident in February. And that's true. That was the one incident. And I dealt with it at that time. It was kind of a he said, she said. It had happened 2 months earlier. And I didn't fire or reprimand other than saying, I don't know what you're thinking. It makes no sense to me not to do it. But it was done and over. I had no more correspondence after the February phone call from Mr. Schwab. And then the first week of June, I received a letter from his attorney preparing to sue me for wrongful termination, which I didn't have. I couldn't understand why that was. I know he didn't get terminated. He'd quit. I gave the letter to counsel. Counsel contacted through a letter to Schwab's attorney and advised him of the circumstances, and that was the end of that. And then in July, as you can see in what you were provided, he sent me this text with further allegations that had happened in November, the previous November. And in that, he essentially said, I'm going to city council if you don't let me back in your bars, extorting me. My position at the time was, which you can see my answer later in the text stream, I don't know what you're doing here, but you tried to sue me. Talk to your attorney. I don't know what he's thinking. If I was in on something, or if I was aware of something, or if I had something to hide, I certainly could have easily just let him back in the bar when he threatened me. But I had no belief that I had done anything wrong, that the bar had, I knew of the incidents from his text that had happened back in November, but as far as I was concerned, my conversation with Casey Walters from those texts, that I had resolved once and for all that what had happened, wasn't going to happen anymore, which I talked about earlier. So I want to clarify that contacted once in February about one issue that had happened with one girl 2 months earlier, not contacted again until A, I was sued, and then B, I was contacted with his other allegations from November, including the threat that if I didn't let him back in the bars, he was going to city council. And as you can see, it came to city council with my approval. I didn't have any reason to try to hide anything.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question?
Sure. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Could you detail some of the changes that you've made
I can, thank you.
since either the first or the second compliance check and kind of the timeline on those?
You bet. I tend to be long-winded. I apologize, partly because I'm upset about everything, but the two compliance checks I want to talk about, first of all, I mean, it's impossible to excuse them. The first one, as actually Michael Schwab mentioned, the manager didn't have a doorman on yet and was inside, and someone walked right in the doors, went and ordered a drink at the bar. Well, the way we're structured, the bartenders don't card. They're assuming a doorman has carded. There was no doorman. Manager got fired that night as soon as they found out about it. That was the end of Josh Northrop was his name. He was done. Completely inexcusable. The second one that just happened in October, I mean, to me, it's one of those, you can't make this stuff up. There was just a position created at all the bars that only 2 people are even eligible to work based on their manager referral of their competence, their ability to.
Excuse me. I think the question was, what changes have you made since?
Thank you. Okay, I'll get back on that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we did as a result of the school year beginning was to try to get a very strong, robust front door situation, and also to try to prevent what happened with an insider doing something. That at this point, only 2 people are even allowed to work the front door at any of the bars. It's the same 2 people all the time. They're required to attend a meeting every Monday with my district manager, Brad Temple, to get one-on-one with management instead of just hearing things second or third wheel, hearing everything that's going on with IDs, everything that's going on with the police department, everything. They have to attend every Monday. They get a pay raise. We're also started a bonus. It just started November 1, actually. So now what I'm going to do, I used to rely, unfortunately it stopped, and it's nobody's fault. The way I had to monitor whether our bars were doing a good job or not a good job with minors was the police used to provide us with a monthly report of how many incidents. And that way, if a month came and I saw 2 or 3, I could immediately get involved, correct that with the manager. Hey, this can't continue. And then there would be no accumulation over 12 months. Well, when they haven't been sending them, I didn't find out until last week that there was 15. I could have long ago had I known. And the only way we really know is if police are citing and we know that they're citing. Well, it's now on, I can no longer live under, I was kind of just drifting along thinking, well, the police they'll tell me if we're doing a bad job. Obviously that's not true. So now my regional manager is going to be contacting at the first week of every month. So December 1st will be the first week, Ames PD, asking for a report of all the bars, how they did the previous month. The manager of each bar and the 2 door personnel are eligible for a $100 bonus each. If there's a 0 that month, if there's 1 minor that month, they get 0. If there's more than 1 minor, they're all 3 subjected to termination or disciplinary action. So the standard is 0. 1 is you get nothing, but if you get more than 1, you're in trouble. We're going to proactively now get the report so that I can monitor every single month prior to anything accumulating. If we have a problem child, I'll find out well in advance and remove it. We added a page. This was a good suggestion. We added a page into our employee handbook. And this was more about the insider idea, kind of a whistleblower idea, that now all employees are required to report if they're asked or they witness any, which Mr. Mr. Schwab talked about. In this case, that would have applied. Here we have an insider seeing something, report it. It's expected to be reported to me so that I can address it. If it's not reported, you're considered basically part of the problem, so to speak, and then you're subject to that. And now also the managers are going to be, Mr. Tressy's trying up for me, a code of conduct agreement that I'm going to have the managers all sign at the time of employment, current and future. We'll all sign a code of conduct agreement that subjects them to possible criminal charges or legal action if they are knowingly or unknowingly participating in or allowing illegal or unethical conduct that jeopardizes the business they manage in any way. And number 4 on my list here, the regional manager is going to be conducting random stings. I'm not comfortable sending in minors because what I don't want to do is actually send a minor and then I end up getting police come in, there's a minor in there. So we're going to be sending in, the new policy is that 100% carding is now there. They have handheld units in their hands, electronic swipers, 100%. If I walk in at my age, you're supposed to card me. If a 21-year-old walks in, you're supposed to card everybody. There's no more thinking. There's no more guessing. It also makes it easy for us to see if somebody's not doing that, then we know we've got, somebody that's prone to not following the rules. So we're going to conduct our own things as well to make sure every single transaction is getting swiped as they come through. All these things combined with probably more of a psychological in the back of the mind now, knowing something that I didn't foresee could happen, which is somebody at a high level doing something that was going on. And so just that paranoia on top of everything else, I'm very comfortable that I won't be standing here again with these kind of problems. Minors getting them is hard, but it's not impossible. I mean, I see Casey in 1 year had 2 at the busiest 2 bars in campus. I mean, it's definitely, it has to be taken very serious and it's very aggressive. But now if people are making $100 each, getting a 0 or possibly losing their job, getting a 1 or more, I do think that the seriousness of it and the commitment and putting the manager at the door now instead of inside where they're normally watching for sales and drinking and things going on. Now it's kind of flipped to 70-30, 70% at the front door, 30% inside, to try to really get aggressive about making sure we're like Fort Knox to get into.
Mr. White, you started to explain how the November incident occurred, because what I'm trying to understand is you made the changes, but then it still occurred under new management. So what happened in November?
Right. So, okay. Correct. I understand that. So in October, and this is, again, makes me look bad, October 1st of 21, so 1 month before that, I created a position at 6.5 figures a year. I won't do exact math, but almost $200,000 a year, the position to manage these 4 bars in Campus Town, knowing that I was going to be removed. I'm gone at 6 months a year now. So I knew I was leaving, and I needed, knowing that that was a recipe for disaster, the cat's away, the mice will play type. I brought my managing partner from Iowa City, gave him a massive promotion, massive responsibility to make sure these bars are being run properly, professionally across the board. And that includes everything. That's everything from minors to all the liability issues, and of course the cleanliness, the repair, et cetera. Anyways, that position started October 1st. He's done a tremendous job, but it looks bad because 5 and 6 weeks later is when this was going on. Again, the problem is I don't blame him, Brad Temple. He was just getting started, just beginning to formulate how to get everybody working together, training, hiring, just moving the process into it. This went on. The texts were all from the month of November. And how it happened was, as I keep saying, somebody that I never thought, one of the people that's sitting at the table every single week being lectured, you're going to lose your job, make sure everybody's doing their job, was the one doing the nefarious activity. I didn't foresee that. I didn't expect that. And I still, to this day, don't understand it. And if it wasn't the one person I probably never would have thought did it.
And what about the October 2022 incident?
That's what I said was you can't make this stuff up. That person had been 5 weeks into the new role of the higher pay, you got to sit at every single meeting. You can't, you're supposedly, you were recommended by your manager as the most serious door guy we got. Sat in all those meetings in October, whatever that date was. I woke up in the morning and saw the text. I was sickened. I couldn't believe the details that it was a vertical ID, and apparently it said not old enough until whatever the date is. And there is no explanation. The doorman got fired immediately. He didn't have, as Casey actually talked to him, he didn't have really an explanation. He said, well, the date was wrong. Nothing believable, but I can't explain it. I would just probably say in my own mind, it's kind of like, how does a guy that's 6'5", plays basketball since he was 8 years old, miss a layup? I mean, this was literally a layup. Somebody walking up with an ID that's basically obviously fake, and they got in. He didn't ask for money. He didn't turn. He screwed up. I don't know how. I think preoccupied. Maybe the officer that was with him, the undercover, maybe looked obviously old enough, so he just kind of brushed it, and didn't. I don't know. I don't have an explanation. Completely inexcusable. Cost him his job right away, but that doesn't do us any good here today. But that
Thank
was.
you. Is there any other questions? Anita, do you have any questions?
Only for Chief Huff, please.
Okay, well, is there anybody else in public forum? This public, if you want to speak, it's under public public comment, not public forum. You introduce yourself and your address.
My name is Casey Walters. My address is 1517 Grand Avenue. I was the acting manager of Outlaws from March when the other one got fired until January, February times. A little, don't really know what day it was. I left or I got removed. But it's me in the text. I'm the one that sent them. It is a big problem. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not admitting that everyone I said is good was underage. As you guys might know, we do have covers every Friday, Saturday. A lot of these people are VIPs. Some of them are not. I'm just here to, I guess apologize, but not only apologize, but admit to my wrongs and then let you guys know that what I did was wrong and it wasn't on Mr. White, the owner, or it wasn't on Outlaws. It was on me. I had a guy at door that I also considered one of my friends. He also lived in one of the rental houses I own. So I was pretty close with him. And then he walked out on a shift because I said a girl was good to go in. I walked over, I checked her ID. They said she was 21. I let her in. This girl let me know that she's had problems with this guy in the past. So I said, no, Mike, she's good to go. Then he walked out and I don't. So when people walk out on shifts, I don't just say, okay, you're fired. That's done. You quit, whatever. I make it a point because we've had it in the past where people walk out on shifts and nothing happens. They're able to come back to our bars. They're able to have fun. So a couple weeks before that, another guy walked out on a shift and I banned him. Michael Schwab did the same thing. Walked out on a shift, I banned him. I had a meeting with him later. I think it was in February, just to kind of sit down and talk with him and say, Mike, this is what happened. You walked out. I said, Jordan Elfer, which was the other guy that I banned, I said, after spring break, you can come back. I said, it's in a month. I thought that was all good, but it wasn't. I apologize.
Thank you.
So, if I could, Mr. Walters, I appreciate you coming tonight and appreciate you owning this. I'm curious, why are you here tonight?
I'm here actually. The owner, Andy White, didn't really think I should come. I'm the one that's at fault here. I'm the one that did these things.
Whose idea was it for you to come and speak to council tonight?
It was my idea.
Okay.
So I wasn't told to come speak to you guys. I was actually advised not to at first. And then he said, okay, yeah, you can come.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Michael, do you want to address anything else? I'll give you you'll be the last one. Then you come on up. Others have talked a second time. Never going to close public comment.
Just wanted to add on to some of the things they said for that one individual. There are some references in the text messages as well from November 20th, where I did mention this person because on my day off, I saw her in the bar and she kept getting in. She is friends with a few bartenders as well as roommate with another one at another bar. On the December 17th incident, one of the bartenders that worked with me at Outlaws sent me a text or sent me a Snapchat of a screenshot of the Snapchat she had with Casey, where she asked for permission to bring in her friends. Casey gave it to her. She sent that to me. I told her no. Then I sent the text message to Casey telling him I veto his approval. That's when he came to the bars and told me that he's the boss. He can do whatever he wants and I need to do what he says. There was no checking her ID. I have confiscated her fake Ohio and her fake Minnesota ID. It should be at Outlaws and it should be turned into the police. If they have a categorized system, they could look that up. This person was well known to be underage. It was very common for underage employees and their friends to get into the bar. I offer for any city council member or even the licensee, if he's interested on taking a further look at this problem, to see hundreds of instances of this going on. For him saying that I was banned for leaving the bar, I was very clear I would not let the underage girl in, and if he wanted to let her in, he would have to bounce for the bar. He made his decision, and I made mine. I clocked out after he walked her in personally. I thought we settled things the day after. He made an agreement the day after the December 17 incident, where I thought we worked things out, where I thought I wouldn't lose my job, where I thought I wasn't going to be banned. But it even extended to the February meeting I had again with Casey Walters, where he clarified that I would continue to be banned unless I agreed to not say anything about it. So for him to say that I'd be unbanned after spring break, was it? I would have a question now. Am I still banned?
Thank you. All right.
30 seconds.
This is the last one.
Yeah, this is the last one. This is the last one. I just need 30 seconds.
Well, we don't want to revisit the interactions between the employee and the employer, essentially. If you would, please go ahead.
Okay. So again, I don't want to get more in the weeds here. I'm glad I'm the last one talking, except for council members talking to the chief. Tim knows, all of this stuff, he said, she said, and that's the point of why we're here tonight. We're not saying this was right, this was wrong. He said this, show what the text meant. Who sent the text? Where's the digital history? We're not doing any of that. And I feel like a lot of your time's been wasted here tonight. And yes, here I am wasting another minute of it. So I apologize. But I want to get something straight here. This is two people now that have come up here and expressed something screwed up. They admitted to it. Casey did not have to show up here tonight, but because Andy gave him a second chance on a monumental screw up, he wanted to come here tonight to lay it down for Andy, who also is requesting from this reasonable council not the death penalty on an 18-year license, a complete non-renewal, and putting a business out of business, but option 3, which is the 8-month probation, fine, whatever you want. That's the way our system works. Well, I don't say whatever you want, I take that back, but you know what I mean. That's the way our system works, both crime, criminal position, even civil. People get to fix things that there were errors. People get to compensate for things that they did wrong. And that's all we're asking, is for some common sense, rational reasonableness, and not put an 18-year business out of business for a situation that everyone admitted to and that is taken care of. And that's what we're asking. Let us prove to you that this situation is taken care of and it's not going to happen again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Chief? Okay, Anita, do you have a question for Chief Huff?
Yes, I just wanted to ask you to walk through again the process. Once an establishment has been cited, who is notified, and then what are the next steps? And I heard too that perhaps the establishment, or at least the owner, wasn't aware of the underage individuals that were on premises. Tell me what that process is typically like as well. Who gets notified and what happens next? I know in the past you talked about a process of working with those establishments. And so, yeah, I just want to know more about what's been done.
Sure. So our ability to spend time in the bars has been hampered by staffing issues. And so we haven't done as much of it as we used to. We also aren't sending out as many notifications to the bar managers and owners as we used to because of the same reason. But as a general rule, when an officer cites someone that's on premise, everybody around there sees that. I would be surprised if the staff that works at that establishment didn't recognize that a citation was being written, just because of the way that works. And we always believe that the folks that are running the bar from night to night should keep the owners and the license holders aware of what's going on as well. I don't believe it's just our responsibility to keep people that are not on site in the know, I guess. But we have discussed trying to have more frequent communication with the bar owners and managers, so they're aware, when citations are being written. However, again, I believe in most cases they should know anyway.
Okay, thank you.
So just point of clarification to Nita's question. So in this first compliance check that they failed, was a written notice issued to the bar owner?
So in the compliance checks, those are a little bit different. You write the employee and then ABD will reach out. And so they should have gotten notification from Alcoholic Beverage Division of a compliance check failure. Those are a little bit different.
So Mr. White would have received both, on the basis that ABD did their job, they would have received notification.
That's been my experience. I obviously can't speak for him, but that's my experience is ABD reaches out, lets them know
Because they're the license
that.
holder. Because they're the license holder.
Yes, because
And
of
their
the
license
license
is potentially
holder.
in jeopardy, or they're going to be fined. They're going to have a 30-day suspension
Correct.
if they have a second one around. So they obviously need to be.
And it's in Iowa code where when they have that second violation within 2 years, there's that suspension and the fine. So in addition to just the fine for the person that failed the compliance check, on that second one especially, you get the suspension and the fine to the establishment.
But so then the difference is on the citations of being on premises. That's the one that's maybe not necessarily a written
Right.
communication. Is that correct?
That's a little bit different, and it's a little bit different now than it was 2 years ago pre-COVID. So we had a team of officers, I'm sure you're aware of the Safe Neighborhoods team. Some of their responsibility was to have more frequent bar checks going on. That team was absorbed into the patrol division because we were just so short-handed. And so our enforcement has been a little bit more sporadic than it used to be. Once that team is put back together, hopefully, I would hope by maybe July of 23, you'll see a little bit more consistent enforcement going on because we'll put that responsibility back on them.
Thank you. Any other questions for Chief?
Chief, I wonder if you could help us think through a little bit. Mr. White makes the point that there were events happening in Outlaws that he simply wasn't aware of, and that somehow we should view this differently because he didn't have knowledge. That concerns me a little bit because doesn't that incentivize licensees to not know what's going on, to somehow hide behind the fact that they're too busy or they have other responsibilities? Shouldn't we incentivize licensees to be knowledgeable of what's going on in their establishments?
So I absolutely agree that the license holder is not only responsible for what happens in the bar, just like I'm responsible for what happens in the police department, but they should have that knowledge. They should actively seek to make sure they understand what's going on in their businesses.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chief Huff?
I've got one more.
Yes.
So alternative 3 is to entertain an application for an 8-month renewal. I know in the past when we've had some more issues with establishments, one of the options has been a 6-month license. I guess I'm wondering why that was not.
So ABD has discontinued 6-month licenses, and now they're either 8 or 12. And just to be clear, for that option, you would deny the 12-month renewal, and that's the only actual action you would take. The license holder then is free to do whatever they want. They can appeal that decision. They can file an application for an 8-month, in which case it would come back before you. But you wouldn't be saying that you would renew an 8-month if it came. You're just saying you're not renewing the 12-month, but obviously if it came before you, you would look at an alternate 8-month license.
Are those the only 2 license renewal options then? But are there other actions that we can take? I know like Des Moines City Council recently took some actions on some various bars for some challenges.
Yes, that is correct. So the 8 and 12 are the two options you have for renewals, other than their special 5-day
Right.
licenses, things like that. My understanding, which is not fully understanding, but in Des Moines, I think there were some special use permits, and I don't fully understand what those were, but I think that's what they were working off of, is they were given special permissions to do certain things, and they violated the rules, and so they suspended those. The council could certainly at some point in the future talk about a system of doing their own types of suspensions, but that would require a lot of work and action to figure out.
And so if option 1 was approved, which is denying the application, can you walk through again for council what transpires, and is it possible that this council's motion could be overruled by ABD?
Yes. So the way it works, if you deny the application or deny the renewal, excuse me, the applicant then can file a appeal with the Alcoholic Beverages Division. That's the first step. Once they file the appeal, the licensee continues to operate just like normal through this process. So they keep operating. Depending on what ABD does, the next step is an administrative law judge. And then the next step is the director of the Alcoholic Beverages Division. And then the next step after that is actually district court. So there's 4 steps in that process. You're really the first word in that process on whether you approve or deny the renewal application.
Any further questions? All right, council discussion? Or maybe you're ready for a motion?
Okay, I'll jump in. I'm very glad that this is not our normal course of conduct for the city council. We're not very good at this. If you're watching this, you think, well, these guys really don't know what they're doing. We sort of don't. We're sort of feeling our way through this, and appreciate the indulgence of people as we work through this. A question might be, why do we care so much about this? And I think that's a fair question. And I think about the fact that our chief role as a city government is to keep our citizens safe. Nothing else matters. And families all over the Midwest and all over the world entrust their children to us to make sure that they're safe. And we have a problem with underage drinking in Ames. And I am very concerned that this matters before us. Mr. White offers a defense that because he was not aware of this conduct, that somehow that should be a defense. And we cannot have that as a defense. So that all that does is incentivizes bar owners to not pay attention to what's happening in their operations. There's a concept of principal and agency, and what the employees know, the principal is supposed to know. And you raised the question of having a bit of a sliding scale for compliance. And we should take into account that there's an 18-year track record. I actually think that cuts the other way. And so if we give anyone a bit of a break, it should be the person who's brand new, who really doesn't know what they're doing, it really hasn't had a chance to learn how to train people. But honestly, I think the fact that this is an 18-year establishment, I think that argument cuts the other way. And I think it's sort of bold to suggest that would be grounds for us giving more leniency. I think my concern is that you should know better after 18 years of how to run an establishment. And I want to acknowledge the courage of people who come and say hard things. So I appreciate that statements tonight. So I'm, with all that's been said tonight, I'm going to go ahead and follow the staff recommendation. I worry about the precedent that's being set here. This is not just about Mr. White, but it's about others who are similarly situated, and the example this sets. I don't like doing this. None of us like being placed in this position. This is one that I find myself begrudgingly taking on tonight, but I'm going to recommend the staff recommendation of alternative one to deny the application for a 12-month liquor license renewal, and we'll let ABD and the district court work through this
That's a motion.
as a motion.
Is there a second?
A second.
All right, move and seconded. Discussion or further discussion?
So I don't disagree with some of the things that you said. I think failing 2 compliance checks, admittedly, by the applicant themselves, knows that that's a terrible situation to be in. I think when you have what clearly is a lack of maturity amongst the people running the bar and a lack of maturity amongst the people who are trying to enter the bar, that makes for a very bad recipe. But I'm having a hard time squaring the fact that we just renewed a liquor license last week, a 12-month license for someone with 15 citations in the last 12 months. And so when we talk about setting precedents and the way that we evaluate things, I'm just having a really difficult time squaring that. So
I think where I look at that is the establishment last council meeting passed their compliance check, and this establishment failed twice. So if we were to give a second chance, it would be the second compliance check, which was just failed. And so that's why I'm going to be supporting staff's motion.
Yeah, I mean, that is it's a good question. I think it's a matter of the compliance checks versus just the in-bar checks too, because when a compliance check happens, that is, they're not trying to pass off fakes in compliance checks to trick staff. That is either no ID or a real ID that shows them underage. And so that's sort of it's an even different bar. So just discovering that people have come in with a fake into a bar, while it's not great, it's a different level, I think, for me. I get the point about it wanting a second chance, right? And admitting your mistakes. And I appreciate that you've come here tonight and have said that. I appreciate that you came and have owned up to this. For me, it's an issue of fairness in the liquor license we denied last time at our last meeting too. Similar situation where staff were allowing something to happen, and then we had someone come in and say, "Oh wait, but I'm actually the in charge of this organization. I didn't know this was going on. Here, I'll do this and this and this to fix things," and we denied them too. And I just keep thinking back to that, and I'm like, well, how is this different than that one? Because it was sort of a similar structure, and I think that element of fairness, or having kind of set that precedent with the last one that we denied, is where I'm really having a hard time, coming around, and that's why I seconded Tim's motion.
Anita, any comments?
I'm also thinking that I understand and can appreciate the 18 years and that this is really an outlier for the company. But at the same time, all of us know that if, for instance, I'm controlling a vehicle and I go the wrong way down the street, that saying, "Oh, I didn't see the sign," is not the excuse. So I'm still responsible for that wrong move at that time. And so for me also, what we've done now more recently historically, as well as the fact that information had been shared, that the owner was aware. I appreciate the steps that are now being taken, but I agree with option one.
Gloria, any comments on Mike?
I'm not going to draw this out because I agree with everything that has been said. However, I would also like to express appreciation to Mr. White for implementing these new procedures, which I assume are in place at Patty's and Sips, and that I hope that this will not impact those businesses negatively. And I think probably Mr. Walters has a duty to uphold your trust in him at those locations.
Okay.
Mayor, one more thing. I want to make sure that I acknowledge the work of Chief Huff. And for those who think that this is the way we roll, that if somebody makes a mistake, we put a hammer down, that's actually not the case. So in my 9 years on council, there have been instances where bar owners there were altercations, there were problems, and our police department has gone out of its way to find ways to keep businesses in operation. So for those of you who don't have that context, this is a unique situation for our police chief and a recommendation that was not made lightly. So I just want to underscore my appreciation for PD and their work to try to find ways to keep establishments open, but yet to protect our citizens.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Sorry, Anita, you are aye for the motion. Is that correct?
Yes, I was aye for the motion. Thank you.
All right. So motion carried 5-1. All right. We will move on to item number 19, Ames Urban Fringe Plan Update. Kelly.
Good evening, Council. I'm returning to you from our October 25th meeting to talk about a response to the Board of Supervisors' requests for changes to the proposed Ames Urban Fringe Plan update process. So we went through what the update was and what the public comments were back in October, and staff laid out some options of how to proceed forward. At that time, you asked staff to look at the comments we got from the Board of Supervisors, and we discussed a lot what Ames's priorities are for a cooperative plan. And that was really emphasizing that we have some goals for managing growth, our ability to annex land into the future, and try to compare these goals that we have with what our default authority is for annexation and subdivision, and then decide if a cooperative agreement makes sense for us. Because there are some added benefits for doing a fringe plan. We really focused on if the county is willing to look at compatible uses up against the city within planned growth areas and urban reserve. There is benefits to the city of doing this. So with that charge, I went and looked at the fringe plan, looked at some of the requests from the Board of Supervisors, and what I've provided back to you is what I believe is an update with some revisions to the draft that speak to our interests, and it would be in our interest to also proceed with an agreement that is consistent with these recommendations. So in a short order, what I would describe as the main areas here are the urban reserve, and I'm going to put a map up so that we can look at something while we're talking here a second. Seems to have disappeared. So this is the graphic out of the edited document. It's part of your council action form. So what we have up on the screen is a depiction of the land use designations around the city, which has 3 base designations for essentially for ag and farm services, growth areas that are really the primary planned areas for expansion, and then rural residential is reflective of existing areas that are already developed in the county. The hatching represents, for the most part, urban reserve overlay, which indicates future areas of compatibility and growth for the city. So one of the main issues that we had with the plan was to look at planning for a long-term future for the city, not just the next 10 years, not just 20, but I think about what the long-term horizons are. And that's what Plan 2040 did for us as part of this process. So what we're proposing in response to the urban reserve overlay, which was a concern for the county, we're proposing that the conditional uses that the county would follow up to reduce the amount of conditional uses that could be allowed in the urban reserve, as well as the growth area. We're proposing to subtract a small area in those red circles from the urban reserve, which would then go back to ag and farm services. But we are reserving the right to annex land when it is a request to annex to the city. So we are leaving out something that's called involuntary annexation, which is a process that's initiated by a city with or without willing participants. There's a long process to do that. That's not something the city has ever intended to do out here. That's not our goal to do something out here. We want to respond to petitions by property owners to allow them to come into the city as they comply with Plan 2040. Now with that, and this is where some of the controversy is, sometimes you have to bring in other properties to meet state code to avoid islands or to have uniform boundaries. So in this plan, if we went forward with our suggested edits, normal annexation policy, normal annexation law would apply. So an 80-20 could happen if necessary, but we would not be initiating annexations ourselves in these areas. So that meets our interest. That's really what we're trying to get across here, is that this is a long-term plan. The blue areas are more immediate, but the hatched areas are also possible for growth, but definitely in the long term, they're possible for growth. Within those limited uses, we had a longer list of outdoor and indoor activities. Staff is saying that if you think of it as what's a type of use or building that could be compatible with urban development. So I'm looking at this through if we annexed land and you were developing residential neighborhoods around it, what are the likelihoods that that's an issue for somebody in the future? So in my eyes, most of these uses that could occur within a building primarily, that's what we do in cities. Most of our activities are within buildings. So a few uses could be subtracted, highly unlikely to be disruptive to future growth. It's the outdoor uses, the larger scale uses that are generally not a good neighbor to residential densities. That's what I am asking for the county to consider as a restriction on future compatibility. Now, I did note in the report that even if Story County agrees to the concept that we have put here, it does not in and of itself restrict these uses. They would have to go through an amendment process through their zoning ordinance to literally implement this and to limit things that are there. So exactly how it's written, I can't say that tonight. That's something Story County would have to work through. Every intent, if they accepted this, we would assume they would follow through and do this. Now, one issue that could come up, and I can't say I know all the answers for Story County, there are conditional uses that exist around the city right now. So my understanding would be if you have a conditional use permit and it's been issued by the county, that does not go away by the adoption of this plan. That would generally be allowed to continue as long as you're going to operate that business. And I would presume that's how Story County would look at it as well. But that's a level of detail that I couldn't answer tonight because that'd be a Story County level of question. So our intent is to not establish new uses that would be incompatible. We understand there might be uses out here in the county now that we wouldn't want to establish, but they'd be able to continue as is my belief. Another component of the urban reserve, as I stated, is it's more of a longer term goal, longer term compatibility idea. The Board of Supervisors had asked to put a little more context about what the urban reserve is to kind of distinguish it a little bit more from the growth areas. I think Plan 2040 does that. We have two descriptions of the fringe areas. We have growth area, and then we have areas that are not growth areas, which would be essentially the urban reserve. So in the staff report, I discussed that we would frame the urban reserve overlay. I did not provide you specific language as an edit to the plan for that, but I would redirect you and let you know what we would incorporate and where and how. I'm not sure right now. We would rely on specifically language from page 69 of Plan 2040, which talks about annexation in other areas. And it describes how we would think through what is appropriate for annexation based on timing, availability, and need, and those kind of factors that we would just do as good planning for the city and how that would relate to this in the future. So it's a little open-ended, but I'm going to be relying again on Plan 2040 for that guidance, and whether that goes in the 28E, whether that's just additional background context within the plan, that's something I'd have to work out. with the county as we finalize the plan, assuming we go forward. So I just wanted to let you know that even though there wasn't a text edit, the intent was to really follow upon Plan 2040's established language to guide that in the future. So with the urban reserve, are there any questions about the policies, issues, or mapping that are directly related to the urban reserve? I'm just going to talk about that topic to start with and see if there's questions.
Questions? Anita, do you have any questions on the urban reserve portion?
No, thanks.
Kelly, just a point of clarification before you move on. On the map, you indicated that the blue areas, what are the blue areas indicating?
They're the primary growth areas in Plan 2040. So when we put the plan together, we included some base work from a scenario and evaluations, and then other properties that could easily be served by the city. So those are the areas that are already kind of master planned within Ames Plan 2040. They have an intent for land use designations already prescribed for them. So they're the most readily available land for annexation.
So the Meadow Glen area and the area on Worley Creek is shown. And I think there was something in the report that may say that that's not.
Yeah, so that I would put.
Would you please clarify that? I think that's
so
something-
Meadow Glen right now is shown in the blue. So if you're not familiar with this part of the area,
maybe you can zoom in on that.
So Meadow Glen is an existing rural residential neighborhood it's in that peninsula of blue. There's some other county properties out there too that aren't specifically part of Meadow Glen. But it was a point of discussion. You've had a lot of public input about that during the Plan 2040 process. You had a lot of input about Southwest growth, and a lot of the same interests and people that participated in Plan 2040 also participated in this process. So the county, in response to those concerns about annexation, proposed that it would not be annexed, it would become rural residential. That was in combination with some other suggestions that no urban reserve area would really have the ability to be annexed. So our comprehensive response is this. I understand the existing neighborhood rightfully could be described as rural residential existing, just like a lot of the yellow areas surrounding the city. So we're proposing that Meadow Glen becomes yellow. That would leave them under county authority for any property subdivision, boundary line changes, anything of that nature. Would not require annexation to do any kind of a lot line adjustment or anything like that. But we do reserve the right that if necessary, an 80-20 annexation could be applied if there was an annexation in this area, and we can meet state law to do that. So we're trying to balance that your typical day-to-day stuff can stay with the county, but long-term, if necessary, it could be included in an annexation.
How about the Champlin property, which is to the southwest
the
of that?
former Champlin property, which is kind of the square area, a little bit to the west of the circle, that would stay blue. And that's consistent with Plan 2040 in that we have water and sewer that is stubbed pretty closer to the boundary of that property. So that property could not subdivide unless it was annexed into the city. If it was annexed into the city, then we would be in charge of the subdivision review for that property.
And can you just clarify what the state law stipulates in terms of, I just search for terms, gerrymandering or whatever, in terms of outlines. What is the city bound to do in terms of what can and can't they do in terms of when they annex a piece of land? When, as you said, it's voluntary, at least 80% have to be wanting to have it annexed.
Right. So under current state law, the annexation of a voluntary annexation is described as an annexation that has no more than 20% of the area as non-consenting, which would mean people that did not originally apply to be part of the annexation. And we're allowed to include up to 20% for two reasons. One, we're never allowed to create an island. So that's mandatory that you fill in an island. The second part is you can take up to an additional 20% to make more uniform boundaries. So the thought here again is more clear governance is better governance rather than a jigsaw puzzle of properties along a street. That would be a good example of more uniform boundaries. So those are the two issues that would come up in an annexation.
And uniform boundaries would basically be more rectilinear versus being all over.
It's not defined, so there's some interpretation there, but the phrase is just more uniform boundaries in the law.
So just in conclusion, the Meadow Glen area that you have circled city is proposing that become designated as rural residential existing, not as a future growth area.
Correct.
But we could, if needed, if, for example, if that property is to the southwest, need to come in and other properties, so you had 80-20, we may have to do that because you would be creating an island potentially.
Potentially it could happen. And to be clear, we've walked through this evaluation of an annexation out here a few years back. It would take a lot of land as one large annexation to bring area to the east, the Meadow Glen area, in with any one property. The Flummerfelt property alone does not have enough territory to bring in that much territory. So it's not that it couldn't happen. It's just there's not a clear path to when that would happen or how that would exactly come together. But again, we looked at a 20 to 40 year time frame, so it is possible.
I know this is an area which is of concern to some residents, and so I'll make sure we're on the same page and that we're clear on what the city is, at least what the staff's recommendation is. Thank you.
Any other urban reserve questions? Okay. So the big one for map changes we just talked about with the Meadow Glen neighborhood. I guess I do want to take a half a step back. We did make a text change at the request of the supervisors that in the urban reserve overlay, properties would be treated the same as ag and farm service in how you could split an existing dwelling away from a larger parcel and then keep that remainder as non-buildable lots. So we agreed with that. You'll see a strikeout that just says we'll follow the base zone. There was some other language that the Board of Supervisors suggested that I didn't include right now. It's related to bullet 8 in their letter, where they talked about changing some of the minimum lot size requirements and recognizing different things. I left that out because I wasn't completely comfortable with exactly what that meant, because I was a little bit deeper into the weeds with how county subdivision and zoning works. I don't know that we're opposed to that. In principle, we were okay with it. But just to let you know, that's not included because I think there's more follow-up on what that would actually mean. So I didn't want to tell you just to say that's fine. So that might be a little bit of a detail that has to get worked out yet. But at this point, I wasn't real comfortable with exactly what the outcome of those minimum lot size changes would be. And then one of the things that the Board of Supervisors wanted to clarify, and I agree we should have as clear of an expectation here as possible, the expansion areas of rural residential. So that's the orange in the legend, but you'll see there's no orange mapped. The county did not ask for any expansion areas as part of this process, but we anticipate that there could be a request. So staff worked together to come up with the criteria. And we want to be really clear, and the Board of Supervisors thought there was some confusion in our language. If you are in the urban reserve overlay, the intent of this plan and the 2080 is that no one would even accept an application to change that to rural residential. So we did make some text edits that you can see that just say you're not eligible to even apply for this amendment if you're urban reserve overlay. So the thought process would be, if someone ever did this, it would be at least a 2-step process to ever do it. So residential expansion would have to occur beyond the urban reserve overlay. It would have to change an ag and farm service designation. The city would still be involved in that because no one can change a map designation without concurrence from the cooperators. So we did want to clean that up, make that clear. And we're fine with that as the city. We have no desire that I know of for rural residential to be up against the city. So I think we're in agreement on that process with the Story County suggestion. And then the last thing I wanted to note under kind of the process part of this was under rural residential expansion, I was also intending to delete the 40-acre size limit. I think I said we agreed with that, but I believe in the text that I attached, I forgot to strike that section out. So in the report, I agree with it. I meant to strike it. We just missed it, again, to make that clear. And then the last one, in terms of like timing and sequencing, originally we had, and this is another edit that I agreed to in the report, but didn't make it into a particular text edit. The original plan had said we would only receive requests for amendments twice a year. I think it was in January and July. The Board of Supervisors didn't want that. They thought they wanted some more options in different times of the year to consider it. We don't have a big issue with that. So I just want to clarify again, the report says we're okay with that, but you won't see a text edit at this moment that says that. That would go into the 28E if necessary. But just again, to clarify, there wasn't a corresponding text edit that should have been done on page 24 to reflect that suggestion. So overall, I think we're looking at this through the lens of our adopted comp plan. Our policies are clear. This is what we intend for the city for our growth management. I think that these recommendations, they do move a little closer to the Board of Supervisors, that we have addressed some of their issues. And I think this would be, I can easily recommend moving forward with this level of edits to the draft plan.
Questions for Kelly?
Kelly, how close are we to the county?
I mean, I haven't had discussions with the supervisors. I think after our last meeting, I sent them what we were working on, gave them an update. They all agreed to extend the 28E till January 1st. That is what council asked for. So everybody agreed. They knew what we were working on. Whether the county will look at the annexation differences here that we're suggesting for urban reserve, and whether they're willing to look at a different list of uses for conditional uses, I don't have an indication on that one way or the other.
It seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like we're still, if you look at what the county sent us in the letter from September 20th, and even you've done so much work to come up with a thoughtful response, but it still seems like we're quite a ways away from the county. Am I saying that correctly, do you think?
Well, I think the representation in that letter was a significant departure from the original intent about specifically about urban reserve anyways, about our annexation abilities. I think it's very clear the city doesn't agree with that. If that's what the Board of Supervisor expects out of the plan, I don't think Ames is going to be agreeing to those types of limitations. So if that is the key thing that they must have to have a cooperative agreement, yes, we're going to be far apart. If it's okay, we understand what you're doing, this is a better context for why you're doing it, and that's meaningful to them, then I think we have moved. I think the Board of Supervisors can maybe accept that and understand the benefits of doing this at that point. But I don't know that. That's what they're going to have to decide.
You know, when we talked about this before, I raised the point, we don't have to have a 28E agreement. So a lot of cities don't.
Mm-hmm.
And while we function, I think, well with one, it may be that the priorities of the county and the city have just diverged enough where we may not find sufficient common ground. I just want to be clear. I mean, I think Bronwyn's point was good. I agreed with that proposal to see if there was an opportunity to move towards, just because of the long-term relationship. But at some point, it may be that we've just spread out too far.
Yeah, and I think we need to be careful not to, I mean, we can't keep sending staff back to go over and over and over in this too. So I think, we see what the supervisors say, but I don't think anyone's proposing that we keep hammering this out farther if we can't come to an agreement.
Kelly, could you, it's probably a repeat, but if there was no 28 agree, let's say there's no fringe plan whatsoever, can you explain what the city's authority is for annexation, what changes, what doesn't change, and what can be done within the 2-mile radius? Because Code of Iowa is very specific, I believe, in terms of certain parameters. Can you just, because I think the point is that I know there's a palpable dislike of the fringe plan, but there's not a fringe plan. That doesn't mean that the city is basically handcuffed and can't do anything.
Right. So we have a great example. We operate in Boone County without a fringe plan. So we have experience with exactly how it works. We apply our policies to any proposal to divide land in Boone County. So if we have no agreement with Story County, anybody that wants to move a property line for any reason is subject to our subdivision code and our policies. You deal with ad hoc requests to waive standards. You don't always waive them. Sometimes you do. It follows our policies. There's no limits on annexation other than state law. Like, we can annex in any direction that we want. So that's really where we would end up with if we didn't have this. And what that means is we often say no to
any kind of division unless it's consistent with our goal of seeing logical extension of infrastructure and that it facilitates the future development and expansion of the city. That's usually how we're looking at things through our lens, whether it's at the fringe plan or whether it's in Boone. Does it further our goals of managing resources in and around the city? And then do we really want to see underserved rural developments that don't have urban infrastructure right up against the city? Those are the things that we're usually looking at.
So what are the benefits to well, actually, I think to both people inside, to the city of Ames as well as those that are surrounding the city of Ames. In your, I know it's going to be in your opinion.
Yeah, and I would really default to Story County because my view is very much slanted to my role with the city of Ames and how do I implement our plan. So for us, it's the main benefit is the willingness of Story County to consider additional compatibility standards for conditional uses up against the city. So if we don't have a fringe plan, there's nothing in Story County's planning process or their zoning board of adjustment that has to consider whether Ames might grow to an area and decide if that use is compatible now or in the future. So that is our main benefit, is that there's a concurrence by Story County and Ames about the growth of the city. I mean, we're the largest city in the county. A lot of job growth, a lot of residential growth comes through us. It would be obviously beneficial in our eyes to have a concurrent plan where we're both seeing things the same way and we don't end up interrupting one or the other with those goals. So that's our main benefit. For the county, I think it helps establish some level of predictability. They also like the natural resource components of the plan, that we're all made more aware of what's out there, that we have chances to look at those things and understand that people are not really expected or enabled to kind of encroach into those areas. So that's I think that's another main issue that Story County overall has. The predictability, the understanding of how rural residential fits into our plans for growth. Those are things that I think are beneficial to them.
Any other questions for Anita? Do you have any questions?
No, thanks.
Okay. All right. We'll open up public comment. We'll give people opportunity to address council this evening. And before we do that, just review for council and the audience what we're looking for in the process we're going to go through. I mean, a motion tonight is not to adopt the fringe plan. The motion tonight would be doing what?
So what's next steps
if council moves to go ahead and move forward with it?
So as I envision it, and I think this matches with Story County Planning Director as well, we're gonna give a recommendation back to Gilbert and Story County. One or both of them or neither could take your recommendation, your suggestions. If one or the other or both take that, then staff will move ahead as early as January as finalizing a document consistent with what you've received tonight. So there's two parts to this. The concepts would be based on what's in your document. The plan might be edited heavily to be more about a plan, and then we'll draft the actual 28E agreement, which is the technical terminology and administrative rules that go along with it. And both of those things would be going through a process together so people understand how the administration is going to work as well as the planning. So once that document's done, again, hopefully as early as the end of January, whoever's cooperating in this will hold public hearings to review a final plan. For us, it's going to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission and then eventually come back to the City Council. If it goes through Story County, it'll have at least those two steps as well. And I'm not exactly sure how Gilbert would do it if in terms of how many reviews they have. But so January, put it together. February hearings, March hearings, and hopefully adoption would be my goal.
Okay, thank you. All right, open public input. Is there anyone who wants to address council tonight on this particular topic? If you'd state your name and address, and if you could try and limit your comments to.
Actually, I came to talk about something else, but issue was asked. that I just
Okay.
would like to provide some perspective on. The Des Moines Register brought me here.
Could you,
Laura Solson.
thank you.
1705 Buchanan Drive.
Thank you,
And I'm
Lois.
actually addressing you on this issue as a former Story County supervisor, and before that, a long-term journalist covering both the city and the county. And the question kind of was asked, what's in it for us and what's in it for the county? So the whole process, and I know Steve was around for it. I don't remember if Deb Shildroth worked for the county that far back or not, okay, for part of this process. But this was really started by the developers. So don't forget your constituents in this. The problem was it was taking forever to have things flow back and forth to get those kind of on the fringe to get a lot of development done. Okay, so as someone who, when I cleaned out my office, I had 2 full drawers of filing cabinets of nothing but documents and drafts or whatever. Okay, I think that it's come a long way, and I just want to let you know that you may be in for some long meetings if you choose to just trash it completely. With that, I'll sit back down. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Anybody else?
Phil Isevely, 3108 South Dakota Avenue. I have about 5 points here that I would like to make after reviewing the updated plan. First one would be the city staff have made some concessions to the urban fringe plan as requested by Story County supervisors, such as removing 3 out of the 14 conditional uses. Board of Supervisors suggested that all the conditional uses be dropped. The second one, city staff have also removed a minimal number of acres from the urban reserve overlay for various properties. That's the red areas. The reduction is minuscule in acres compared to the 17,000 plus that the overlay covers. The third thing, Story County Board of Supervisors are the representatives for the rural residents in the county. The concerns of the people of the county regarding Ames Urban Fringe Plan remain. Residents will continue to voice our concerns for the many issues in the plan that directly or indirectly impact our rural lifestyle. We will continue to work with the Board of Supervisors to effect change to the plan. Other cities in Iowa have fringe plans, none of which are as restrictive a plan as proposed by the city of Ames. The present system used by the county and the city to review and allow or deny growth in the fringe areas of Ames has functioned for a long time. My question is, why does it need to change? My last point would be, I would encourage the city of Ames, the city council, Ames City Council, to revisit their comments from their October 25th, 22 meeting and consider abandoning the urban fringe plan and allow the process to return to one that seems to have worked for everyone's benefit. I would allow the current cooperation that presently exists between Story County Board of Supervisors and the City of Ames City Council and the staff to continue.
Can I just clarify your last point? When you said, are you suggesting that we not have an urban fringe plan?
Yes, I am. That we, on the 25th, in the 25th meeting, one of the options that was brought up was this is way too complicated. We're never going to agree with the county and so on and so on and so on. Why don't we just go ahead? One of the motions, I'm sorry, was that, and that was not passed.
One of the alternatives, yeah. Yeah.
So that's, and what I'm saying is, we continue to go through this thing, and as Tim Garten said, is it really going to make a big difference? Should we just give it up?
Thank
Because
you.
a lot of time has been spent. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi,
Hi.
Liesl Danielson, 2981 South Dakota Avenue. That was good. Now I'm a little nervous. Okay.
We don't bite.
So we just listened for over an hour for that man to fight for his business. I want you to understand what you're asking the county for in this plan. The conditional uses is you're asking them, you have this list of conditional uses, you're asking them to become prohibited. I understand that happens after the plan, but you fully expect that the county would follow through with that. I've talked to the county planner about this. What that means is if they put that into their zoning ordinances, I don't know the technicalities, that would mean that those uses are now prohibited. That means the 10 or so that exist in the fringe today would become legal non-conforming. That means that they can't rebuild if they're destroyed past 60% and that they cannot expand. What have these businesses done wrong but to have their business in the fringe? That's what you're asking the county to do to these people. Our neighbors have Raspberry Hill Bed and Breakfast. And they have the camping permit as well. Sorry. You have to understand what you're asking for here. I'm sorry. Okay, so this conditional use thing is a big deal. We're asking you, there's already a process in place. Ames does get to review conditional uses. They send them to you. You can say why or why not. And this urban reserve and urban growth covers, this is 100 years of land. And you're saying people out 2 miles on County Line Road can't have their Steenhook Environmental because it's a compost, a yard compost. That's an asset for people in Ames to be able to take their compost. For you to have a wedding at a beautiful place like Raspberry Hill Bed and Breakfast, 5 minutes away from Ames, rather than a half an hour to Snooze Hill. I mean, my brother got married at Snooze Hill, half hour back and forth every time he forgot something. This is an asset to this community. And I'm asking you to protect the businesses in the fringe and also protect other people's right to apply for a permit. You don't know I have no idea what the 400 people that live in the fringe may want to do with their land someday. But don't take away their chance to ask and apply for it. And I would also say, if you look at this map, that blue, which is Champlin, is owned by Flemmerfelt. To the north of it is Iowa State. To the south of it is all Iowa State. All the green underneath that is Iowa State land. The reason developers had to keep coming back to do amendments is because that was the area that was chosen as a growth area. It all grew north, so you have to keep amending the Ames Urban Fringe Plan, the current one, because that's where the growth was. Nothing has grown to the southwest because Iowa State owns it, the majority of that land, and they have no intention to sell it. And we are asking that one blue section there that goes southwest of Meadow Glen is an environmentally sensitive area. We are asking you to protect it. That is not a place to plow through development. It's north of it is Iowa State, south of it is Iowa State. There's nowhere to go. So we're just asking, don't force urban development through an environmentally sensitive area. I grew up on Morley Creek, and most of the people that are fighting for it are on Morley Creek, and we're going to continue to stand and fight for it and protect it. So please understand our position. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
You knew I wouldn't give up an opportunity to speak. Kim Christensen at 2985 South Dakota Avenue. What I'd like to say, if you're going to make a fringe plan, make it a win-win for all that are involved. Not only Ames, but all the cities, the county, the townships, which I was elected as township trustee at Washington Township, and most of all, the property owners. Many of these owners have lived on these properties since before Steve was the city manager. We admiredly call this BS, before Steve. These folks are not excited about having any of their property rights taken away. The attitude of Ames will only accept what is perceived as good for Ames, and to heck with everyone else. It's just not right. Please make the plan a win-win for all, and do not make the plan just for Ames. Single lot splits, accessory housing, conditional uses in the fringe area can be an advantage for everybody concerned. So, best of my knowledge, there's only one other fringe plan in Iowa, and that involved Johnson County. Has anyone seen that plan? Has anyone even looked at it in comparison to this plan? It's completely different in their attitude of doing it. So I want to thank you for your consideration in making the fringe plan a win-win. And I want to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. And if your luck holds and you don't see me before Christmas, have a Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Kim. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input. Kelly, can you, did I miss somebody? Okay. I heard someone say something. All right. Kelly, there's a comment made about, non-conforming. Can you discuss a little bit? First of all, I think there's mention of the bed and breakfast. Would you explain what 3 things were struck from your not in the conditional list in your recommendation?
So I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on exactly how the county deals with non-conforming uses, because it's similar, but of course not exactly the same as the city. So bed and breakfast in and of itself, that'd be struck from the list. So there'd be no limitation on seeking a change to your permit if you have one, or to seek a new permit from the county zoning board of adjustment. I don't, again, I'm not going to say I understand exactly what the limitations are, but typically you can't expand what's called a non-conforming use, because it's not intended to be the future of an area. So I don't doubt that their regulations would limit someone that has an existing use from expanding it. Again, how the county would deal with this issue, I'm not 100% sure. That sounds pretty typical, though, how that was described by the speaker on how I would assume it's done. But that's something that the county would have to look at.
But if we took those 3 indoor use types off of the conditional list, it would not be non-conforming, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
correct.
So the
So
bed and breakfast
Would
lodges
still be able to build and expand.
and indoor recreational facilities. You are recommending that those be struck
Those
from
be kept as is in the
right.
county code.
Right. So that's,
and there's a couple of other uses that aren't on this list, like religious institutions, that never were on the list in the first place, because again, there was more of an indoor type of use. So there's a couple of others, but this would be the prohibited list rather than the permitted list.
Yeah. Thank you.
And from what I understand, just to clarify, we have no authority in the conditional use permit process with Story County. We can say whatever we want. We have no standing in that process whatsoever. That's why I have advocated that we ask for Story County to address that. Zoning Board of Adjustment in Story County does not have to consider the fringe plan. They have not considered our comments in the past. So that is why I brought this up as part of this update process. So yes, we can write letters, but we have no standing in terms of conditioning of a conditional use or anything like that, nor could Story County legitimately give us any decision power over a conditional use. So there's, at one point there was a, could we jointly review them, anything like that? That's not really possible. So it's either allowed or not allowed, or whatever controls Story County puts on that type of use. We can't control the conditional uses directly ourselves.
So I think the speaker mentioned that Raspberry Hill is a bed and breakfast and campground. Now, campgrounds are still on the list, but I don't know how a mixed use like that would be viewed.
I don't either. I can't tell you I understand all the things that have been permitted and what's under litigation on that property. So I haven't spent time trying to sort out how Raspberry Hill would work or not work in the future, knowing that they have permits or they're in process of getting permits.
All right. Is there any closing discussion? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
So Kelly, you're proposing, staff is proposing alternative 3. Is that correct?
Do we have alternatives?
There's no
We don't have
alternative.
It's a staff report. It's not a council action form, so there weren't stated alternatives.
Right.
We presented it as essentially one option: proceed in its totality, or tell me what to change.
Okay, I apologize.
We didn't try to write alternatives
Right.
for you.
Thank you. Yes.
I move that we proceed as recommended by staff with respect to Kelly's comments.
I'll second.
Okay. Any closing discussion?
I mean, just, we had a speaker during public forum address the idea that Ames shouldn't be growing. And we went through a multi-year discussion about Ames 2040 plan. And I think all of us would like to have all of our growth interior if we could do that, but there's just no way to accommodate the growth that Ames needs just with increasing density. It's very difficult to do. And I'd also like to comment to the point the speaker said that the Board of Supervisors represents the rural residents of Story County. And that's true. But Story County is 2/3 Ames. And the Board of Supervisors also represents the citizens of Ames. Sometimes I think that's forgotten in these discussions. And so I desire to have a collaborative relationship with the Board of Supervisors. And we'll see what happens with respect to this. But I think we can't have the Board of Supervisors hamstring the growth of the community.
All right. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. All right. Before we move on to item number 20, actually, Kelly, we should just review what the next step is now for this process.
So tomorrow I will send correspondence to representatives of Gilbert and the Board of Supervisors. Hopefully they will both agendize it in December and we'll get resolution one way or another. There's not a deadline attached, but that's what I'm hoping for. So we should know within a month if they're interested in continuing or not. And I'll give you an update at your either the December 13th or December 20th meetings that you have on whatever the outcome is of their meetings.
All right. Let's take a 5-minute break and then we can go on to item number 20. All right.
What?
Item 20, Light Tech proposal.
I'm not supposed to. Never mind. I got
Tell me what you want.
Nothing. Good evening.
Good evening.
Okay. This is not deja vu. This is real. Before you tonight is a discussion of the Baker subdivision for the low-income tax credit development that's on the south parcel of the Baker subdivision. And we're here tonight because you gave us direction earlier this summer because our agreement with the previous developer, Prairie Fire Corporation, expired. And so we decided to go with the 4% competitive process because we felt that that would give us a quicker, we didn't have to compete to hopefully get some units built at the Baker subdivision. So that's what the staff created an RFP, and we solicited for developers, and we kind of updated the RFP and at the 4%, where we wanted to also add some specific percent of the units to be affordable for Section 8 specifically, and also use the use of geothermal, and also offering up $1.8 million of our home funds as part of an incentive for the project. We also added some other bonus points, like if they wanted to increase the number of Section 8 from 10% to another amount, they would have the opportunity to get bonus points for that, and also increase some of the energy efficiency requirements. So the proposal deadline was September 13th. At that time, we received one proposal, and that was from the Commonwealth Companies. They actually submitted an application when we did the very first round, but we ended up going with Prairie Fire. And so their proposal was to do 36 family units. And and they've had some experience in Iowa. They recently did a senior complex in Johnston, Iowa, and they recently got awarded a 9% credit to do a 40-unit family unit in Bondurant, Iowa. So their proposal for 36 units is kind of a mixture of townhomes and apartments. Their plan, as we have the plan up on site there, included a clubhouse, community gardens, and a playground area that they kind of put in the middle of the development. They're proposing of the 36 units that 14 would be 4-bedroom units, 10 would be 3-bedroom units, there would be 8 2-bedroom units, and 4 1-bedroom units. And it would be affordable for 30 years. They also talked about that they would be targeting the 60% AMI, which is a standard requirement of the 4%. It's not a mix. It's a specifically at the 60% or less. And their rents were like a 1-bedroom would be $995. A 2-bedroom is just over $1,100. A 3-bedroom just over $1,300, and a 4-bedroom just over $1,400. They also would want us to give them the cost of the land at no cost, along with the 1.8 of city home funds. And so we had an evaluation committee that we had in the past that's made up of planning and housing, city attorneys, public works, electric, and the purchasing division. And so in reviewing the one proposal, we also invited them come on site, and they presented their details and explained the thin financial margin of the project as a 4% credit as compared to a 9% credit project. And after we did the on-site interview with them, we still had some questions about their timeline, the details of their assumed rent levels we thought were kind of high, their financing, their market for 14 4-bedrooms. That seemed like a lot to us, and some architectural detailing, and the use of geothermal, which they didn't cover very well in their proposal. So we had a discussion with them, and we kind of wanted to get some feedback from them on what what it looked like if they would decrease the number of 4 bedrooms and added more 3 bedrooms and possibly more 2. And also if they would target a little bit more than 60% of the rents, and they would do some at the 50% AMI. Because we know that even though you can go to the maximum 60%, a lot of low-income families can't afford those rents without some kind of subsidy. They just are really high. So by kind of mixing it up a little bit, you can get some at 60 and did some at 50, which is almost looking at the 9%, but not quite. And then we also wanted to know if they would accept some additional Section 8 units, not necessarily set them aside, but just be open to take more Section 8 vouchers, not just the 10%. And then also we wanted to better address the geothermal, because that's going to be a requirement of the site, and if they could accelerate the process and plan for getting the project developed. And we also wanted to take advantage of the LIHTC application process, which would be January 2023. And so they responded and updated a pro forma and with the construction costs, improved designs, looked at the rents and interest rates. And they came back with a proposal stating that the interest rates had gone up, and that alone was going to be an additional $720,000 just from the interest rates going from, I believe, 5 to 7%, 5.5 to 7% since September. And so they wanted to incorporate that as part of their input to us. And also if they reduce the number of 4-bedroom units, and that was going to be an additional $630,000. And then if they implemented some of the design features, that was going to add some more cost, about $1 million. And so just with the interest rate alone, it was going to need more than $1.8 million. It's going to be a total of like $2.5 million that was going to be needed just to cover the interest rates. And then as you can see in the report, as we talked about the enhanced project and the additional assistance for the design features and so forth, our city assistants would now have a gap of $4.1 million. And so with that in mind, they also mentioned that it might be better if we looked at the 9% rather than the 4%, because it would allow some more flexibility with funding. We also had found out that at one point, the Baker subdivision at census tract was no longer considered a low and moderate income census tract, but we recently found out that it was back in for this year, but Commonwealth had already taken that to an account, and that would have added bonus points from IFA of about maybe $900 to $1 million. But that they had already anticipated that and found that out. So that number was already included in the numbers. So we thought we was going to get some wiggle room because we thought the bonus points was going to make a difference, but they had already taken that under consideration. We also met with the neighborhood association and presented the proposal to them as well to make sure that we got their feedback. They thought that the proposal looks pretty solid. The only concern they had was about parking, because the original zoning calls for 108 stalls. But we could work with them to adjust it down to the 72 stalls. And that would be the design that you see on the screen tonight, where we went with 108 stalls. That common area playground, community gardens would have to go away in lieu of more parking spots. And that was something I think we could work with them on. So that's kind of where we are with this proposal right now. And I'm just gonna stop right there and see if you have any questions. Or Kelly, you want to add anything that I may have not covered?
Any questions?
So, I mean, I feel like this is a pretty easy one tonight, but I had two questions. The proposed rents, I don't have a good sense of what market rents are right now. So almost $1,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, $1,174 for two-bedroom, $1,356 for three-bedroom, and $1,500 for a four-bedroom. This is designed to be affordable. How affordable are these compared to their market counterparts?
Well, again, HUD and IFL looks at the income limits based on the jurisdiction. And again, the 60% is between the maximum 80% for HUD, which is most of the time we do first-time home buyers. 60% is really for families who aren't ready to buy a home but can afford rents without subsidy. But when you're talking about low-income tax credits, most of the people that can afford these rents need some kind of subsidy. They need Section 8 vouchers, or they're going to have several incomes for the household to be able to afford the structure at 60%. But the program allows them to be at 60%. That's why we want to encourage some type of acceptance of vouchers to help some people be able to utilize the units at those costs.
Yeah, these hardly seem to be affordable. And a second question, this has been my question in the whole Baker subdivision, is trying to wrap my brain around, if we take the amount of the city's contribution to the project and divide it by the number of units, so we can try to understand what is our level of subsidy per unit. How do we begin to think about that with this proposal? I mean, did you try to think about, for each of these units, how much are we contributing?
Well, we at the 1.8, it's $60,000 per unit of home funds, not accounting land value, not accounting for any infrastructure that's here, and trying to decide what infrastructure benefited this site and all of those other things. We don't have that in the equation. But if you bumped it up to the 2.3, I think we were over 110,000 per unit of local assistance.
A lot of money of taxpayer dollars per unit. And it's some, I mean, I just don't know what that number is where we would say, this is just too high. At some point, these dollars are better spent. If we really want to help people who are struggling, then let's give more vouchers. Let's find a way to help bring the price down rather than for us to be a part of this level of subsidy. It's just mind-boggling, the amount of money per unit. So I know I'm going to be moving, or someone can move
Is there
number
any
3.
comments?
But when we come back to this next proposal, I'm going to be asking the same question about what is the amount of subsidy per unit.
All right, open to public input. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic? Doris?
Loris Olson, 1705 Buchanan Drive in Ames, also president of Home Allies. And I'm going to ask for you to bear with me a little bit, but I don't think I've talked to most of you since I've now started losing my line of sight in my right eye too. So I have to read a little bigger text and whatever. Okay. So my first thing I want to say is I support going for the 9%. Okay, I empathize with the proposed developer about the interest rates. At 6.5%, Home Allies was okay working with our possible lender. Okay, I don't know where we're going to end up. It's a higher risk loan than theirs. But I will tell you, when the first interest rate jump came, I cried. And when the second one came a few weeks ago, I sobbed. Okay. And I know that not everybody takes their work so much to heart, but it's not work for those of us. It's a volunteer effort. I am supporting this proposal because we need to do something. Okay. I like what the staff has proposed for kind of medium ground. I don't like the price tag with it. to remind you guys again, I appreciate the $25,000 you guys put into our project, 8 efficiencies. We're set at about $3,300 each. And yes, Steve, I have broken my promise. I've turned in a request for another $10,000, which represents the increase in the market share. It still leaves it the same. But here's the reality. You don't have anything with the group, for my knowledge, you don't have anything with the group that wanted to build all of those up by Ada Hayden at 60% AMI. Okay, this proposal, which is a great comeback on the staff's part with the 50%, but at 50% AMI even here. So just for our efficiency apartments this year, HUD, and they do the same for a 1 bedroom. They're considered the same here in Ames because of this large student population. Okay, $787, and it has to include heat. So I believe what the developers have put here is what they hope will be HUD's fair market rate in 2 years. I don't think we can wait 2 years. Some of you may have seen the recent article in the paper where Home Allies got a grant from Gannett. Okay, I needed at least one more zero behind it, but that's how it works out. They gave a lot of money to a lot of people, right? They saw the need. All right. I would like to have you guys look at in your motion tonight, say, we'll go with the 9% and have staff work at that. And would the staff be interested in, or would you guys ask the staff to do another RFP? This one for like, say, 10% of the home money or 10% of the ARPA money. And yes, I'm going to be selfish here now, to be put out to a project that is shovel ready, that could break ground next March. Okay. And that would give you the 8 studio units. We'd still be borrowing, believe me. It's just that, as you probably read that article, you know, fundraising is tough right now. There are other big projects out there that have nothing to do with housing. Ours is a small project. Okay. But maybe it's time for all of us to say, until this big project gets launched, because we're still talking, even with the staff proposal, 24, 25, right? And we can have people moved in next summer, as long as we can get the contractors to dig the utilities. It's an ask, and I'm sorry, Steve, because I promised you I would not come back for more money, but that's where we are, and we're in the same boat they are. And with that, I say thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input. Is there a motion?
Move alternate 3,
Which is?
to decline. Go with the 9%.
Second.
Decline the accepted proposal and direct staff to propose an RFP looking for either 4 or 9% tax credit.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved, seconded. Any concluding discussion? Those in favor of the motions, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Motion carried. Thank you, Vanessa. All right, moving on to item number 21, staff report on response to West Town request for residential uses.
All right, good evening. We're coming back to you this evening with an update on a discussion that started earlier this year, back in January 2022. So at that time, at the January 25th meeting, Brent Haverkamp and made a request of council to allow for conversion of some ground level units at his apartments, West Town Apartments on Mortensen Road. And at that time, the request was to allow the conversion to fully residential units on the ground level of 129 units that are currently commercial. And those units right now have a short stay, short-term lodging type of arrangement where the stays are no longer than 60 days. So with that request to go to residential ground floor units, that would mean a consideration would have to be made to the zoning or the language in the current zoning. CCR is the current zoning designation. It only permits residential above ground level commercial. So a change would need to be made either to the zoning or to the language. Currently, or rather with the addition of 129 ground level residential units, the total residential units at 4820 Mortensen would come to 325 residential units. There would still be 32,000 square feet of existing finished commercial space. So at the discussion in January, you directed us to have discussions with Mr. Haverkamp, the owner of Westtown Apartments, to try to find some way to allow for affordable housing to be incorporated into this site with any allowance for ground level residential units. So we have had discussions with Mr. Haverkamp and his representatives, and we did outline for you, based on those discussions, what Westtown Apartments was willing to do as far as affordable housing. And they had two options that they came up with and communicated to us. The first option was that they would be willing to look at opening up all of the 325 residential units to accept Section 8 vouchers. That was their first option, and then the second option was they would be willing to look at approximately 4 to 5 units at the 60% AMI threshold. And those units would be the new ground level residential units. That's where those would be included. So with that, we've come back to you with those two options that the developer has communicated to us tonight. And we do have to, I guess, kind of, there's 1A and B and 2A and B. The first main option would be to do the text amendment, which would then include under that either doing the Section 8 vouchers or the 60% AMI, or option 2 to do a rezoning, and then through a contract rezoning agreement, incorporate language in that would, again, have either Section 8 voucher language or requirements on taking 60% AMI. So that's where we are tonight. And so we're bringing this back to you for your further input and direction.
How about our preference, staff's preference? That would be for the
Yep.
text amendment and the voucher.
Yep. So staff's in our recommendation that we have tonight, our preference would be, as far as the affordable component, to go the Section 8 voucher route.
And then option 1 versus 2.
Yep. So in our in the recommendation, or actually in the staff comments, we believe that a text amendment would probably be the best, as it's already zoned CCR, and then a text amendment would just allow the existing zoning to stay in place. We would do a separate development agreement with that.
I want to add that this is a very high level report. There's no explanation of how an agreement would be structured, exactly how the Section 8 works. So we were just reporting back this proposal. We support it because conceptually it could allow for a lower income household to be housed here than the option of 4 or 5 certain units being set aside at the 60% AMI. But there's a lot that we'd have to work out with the property owner to how this would really work. And are we really going to achieve a result that has lower income households being in this project?
So Vanessa, on the last item, we talked about how the rents proposed were kind of high for people at the 60% AMI. Do you know what a typical rent price that would be at that level would be
What level?
for the 60% AMI or below? What a rent price would be?
It would be very similar to the rents that were proposed, like the one bedroom just being over $900 for one bedroom and $1,100 for a two. Those are kind of the 60%. If you wanted to take, they base it on the number of people in the family, and you divide that over 12, and you could come up with a percent. But those are kind of what is out there for that 60% level. And then as you go down to the 50 and 30, then it drops.
Yeah. I just looked up some of the rents at this property and they look pretty close to the numbers in the staff report. So the existing rents are close to 60% AMI.
So if you had a voucher though, what would people have voucher? What would their income be? Maximum or
The voucher is people at incomes at 30% or less. And so they would pay no more than 30% of their income. And then the voucher would cover the rest. But the voucher also has a payment standard that's a little lower. I can look those payment standards up right quick.
Yep.
We just got the 22-23 payment standards from HUD for Ames. And it's, you can pull that up right quick and give you an example of what the payment standards are. So you can see them in comparison with the 60%. Just one second.
but that's okay for the. It'd be 30, but I'm looking at the people who rent. It's the 30%, right? Which is getting the
But they
lower
would-
people we need to get to. Yep.
Mhm.
Any other questions?
The only question I'd have is how many people, how much unmet need is there? The staff report refers to that there is a lack of landlords willing to accept Section 8 vouchers. I'm just curious, is there a demand of 5, 10, 20, 30 families, or do you have any idea, or is that just hard to say?
It has, in addition to the Section 8 voucher, our housing authority recently got 76 emergency vouchers that didn't have any stipulations like the regular voucher. And of those 76, I think we barely got 20 of them in Ames because a lot of people with the voucher, the landlords don't want to take the voucher. So their voucher is only good for 120 days. So once it expires, they have to start all over. And so, and the landlords that did want to take the voucher, they had other stipulations like the tenant had to come up with their own deposit for rent because they wanted them to have some financial to bring their own finances to it. But if you have a voucher, you don't have 2 months rent for deposit. So they lost vouchers out on that because they couldn't come up with their own money for deposit. So it's kind of been like a lot of people wanting to be in Ames that had to go somewhere else or lose that voucher. But we've had some landlords to participate, but not enough to take advantage of the vouchers that we could have in Ames. We do have a high number in Ames, and those are people who've been in the program for a while, and the landlord has continued to participate in the program. But a lot of the new landlords have not. And then a lot of the units don't qualify because they're sharing a kitchen and living room. They're sharing, renting by the room, which doesn't work for families.
I have a question. I couldn't find anything in the staff report about how long we would anticipate this agreement to be binding on this owner. So would this be a 5-year or 30-year? Would it be permanent?
think for us, we would view it as trending towards permanent. You're giving a permanent land use right. So I think the intent was to have a corresponding component of affordable housing with that. I think we could look at a different duration, but the right to use the property is not going to change. We can't go backwards once we say something is okay there. It's just not practical for anybody to do with that. So that's a longer duration is definitely expected.
Right.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, are we going to open up for?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
open up public input. Is anyone that wants to address council on this topic tonight? Name and address, and then you may begin.
Good evening, Brent Haverkamp, 4915 Timber Creek Lane. The way I view it is there's really kind of two things that we're talking about. So first, we have the requested rezone of the Westtown property. And then the second is we're kind of talking about the acceptance of the Section 8 vouchers at the same property. And although, my desire would be that those two things are not linked, I am in favor of both of those proposals. So on the zoning, I've talked to you guys about that previously. It's a unique zoning category that doesn't fit this property well. And so obviously I'm in favor of the rezoning, and that's what my request was. On the affordable housing, I just wanted to say, as we went through this process, I really agreed with staff and council about, really the lack of affordable housing in Ames. And so and particularly in the difficulty of, once a prospective tenant gets a voucher, the difficulty in finding a landlord that accepts that. So we saw that need and we said, hey, what can we do to solve that need? Now, realize we're at the conceptual level, and we've not talked anything about the specifics of this and what I'm going to be bound to. And so those are things that we're going to work out. But clearly from the concept of it, we'd like to do what we can at this property to see if we can meet a need in that fashion. So any questions for me? There's a lot of details to work out. So
Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input.
Back to, if I can interject, right now, HUD just published the 22-23 fair market rents, and for a one bedroom for Ames, it is $862. For example, two bedroom is $981.
Well, I would go ahead and move option 1A.
Second.
And I would just say I am really pleased with this as a proposal. I mean, I think having these units opened up for the possibility of Section 8 vouchers for use on them, I think that's great. I really appreciate this concept. So I just wanted to say thank you for your willingness to compromise in this way. And I think it's a great step. So
thank you.
So I'd like to go back and reiterate some very strongly held concerns about this. So if we go back in time, making this building have commercial on the first floor makes no sense. This is not an area that's conducive to having first floor commercial. It hasn't done well. And so we took one problem, and rather than trying to accommodate a request to fix it and make it consistently residential, which would have been consistent with the surrounding buildings, instead, we took the approach of asking what we could get out of this for the city. And I think it's important to understand this, because the fact that Mr. Haverkamp is willing to participate in the Section 8 housing, I am very concerned that his example of generosity will only fuel our interest in doing this in the future. In my 9 years on council, we have never asked someone in a similar situation for a quid pro quo. You give us this and we'll give you this. And I worry that we don't have a policy of how we do this. So about a month after Brent's first proposal, we had another proposal that was very similar, wanting us to change the zoning. And I said, well, what is in it for the city? And I got a lot of pushback. Well, I'm just trying to be consistent. So if we're going to set an expectation that we're going to treat one applicant one way, then we need to treat other people the same way. And how do we know what is the right amount? What is the right quid pro quo? None of this is any kind of consistent policy. And so I'm very concerned that we're going to get in our minds that this is somehow an acceptable way of doing business. And respectfully, unless we have a policy on this, I think we should be asking every applicant what we can get for their proposal. So I'll be opposed to this, even though the applicant is agreeing to it on principle. This is not a good way of doing things.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried 5-1. Anything else we need on this one, Kelly?
No, I guess next steps was we'll try to put some details together with the applicant, and eventually that'll come back as an initiated text amendment with an agreement, or it won't. So I don't know what the timeline on that is, but we'll work with Mr. Haverkamp as we can with him.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to item number 22, staff report on residential solar zoning regulations.
Seems like we should be farther along to hit item number 22.
Hmm?
We're only on item 22.
There's only 27 items.
Long night.
Right.
75% done, right? So tonight you're looking at a staff report. Conceptually, this is a response to a referral request. You received a letter from a citizen of Ames asking us to look at solar regulations. The thought process of the letter was if there was less regulation, more solar would be installed. So we, at a high level, gave you a couple of options to consider. We've had solar regulation since I think around 2009. Not a lot of permits pre-2015. The last 5 years has picked up a little bit, especially in the last few years. And we categorize solar in essentially three ways. You have rooftop solar. You could have theoretically wall-mounted solar, so someone that's putting an array that's attached to the side of the house and then is angled back up to the sun. Or you could look at a ground mount structure as well. And then we regulate that by residential or commercial or industrial, depending on what zoning district you're in. Far and away, rooftop solar is the one that is chosen the most often. It's the one for single-family homes that is the most common choice. There might be one wall mount. I'm not sure that there's any ground mount for residential. Commercial has had a one or two ground mount because they might have more space and it's easier to do than put it on a building where they might have other interests. So in the spirit of the referral, we believe that from a rooftop perspective, most common thing, our regulations are actually very basic on that. It does not have high expectations in terms of requirements. But from a sense of can we make the process simpler, it would not be a big loss for the city to remove the planning and zoning review of a rooftop solar system, not a solar system, solar panels. But that would leave the electric utility still involved at the beginning of the process. And at the end of the process, the inspections division would still be doing the building safety and the electrical permit review for that. But you wouldn't have a short step in the middle saying, how tall is it? How does it fit on the roof? Is it flush mount? Give me more details for that. Pretty straightforward. I don't think there's a lot of intrusion in the neighborhood. I think people are now accustomed to seeing these. I do have a little bit of reservation on the ground mount side. We don't allow accessory structures in a lot of places on people's property, trying to make sure there's free space, open yard areas for residential. Wall mount is not very often done. I'd have to look at that if there was a choice there. So at option one, delete that requirement. Option two would be a more holistic look at it, maybe reduce regulations, maybe delete some. And then option three is another version where, again, we're looking at things a little more comprehensively. I think option one is pretty simple and straightforward. It does address the request. That's the easy step forward here.
Questions for Kelly? Open up public input. Does anyone want to address council on this topic tonight?
Good evening.
Hi, Jerry.
Jerry Neal, 916 Ridgewood Avenue. Speaking here tonight for Ames Climate Action Team. Very briefly, we're in support of option 1, which is just the, as he just said, kind of the easy, straightforward way to go with this. It seems like simplifying that section seems like a pretty smart thing to do with our processes. And it would be a lot easier to communicate that to the public than if we start trying to explain modifications that we're making, which is what's offered in 2 and 3. And just as a point of interest, and this is kind of with respect to point 4, which would be doing nothing, a couple of our ACAP members wandered out into neighborhoods and they talked to 3 different families that had fairly significant solar installations in their house. So the common themes, there were 2 of them. One of them was that people are overall pleased with their investment, glad that they have it. But the other common theme that kind of came up was this sense of they had a little bit of a kind of an annoyed response to what it had taken for them to do that. That they felt like the time and the permitting process were a little bit exasperating, kind of had to run back and forth to City Hall a few times and had to sign and double up on things. And so I thought it was kind of interesting that that came up from all 3 separately, not in any horrible way, but just that they all noticed it. And I know that that's not statistical, but I do think that it does speak a little bit to the citizens' experience with the process. So that's it.
Thank you, Jerry. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public input. Is there a motion?
Move option 1.
Second.
All right. Moved and second. Any closing discussion? Let's stay with the motion. Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Kelly. Okay. Move on to item 23. The good news on the DNR. Keith?
Yeah, so just talking to John back there, he just challenged me to take a 2-minute topic and stretch it to an hour. So, just kidding.
John would be wrong.
So now the information.
Yeah, right.
So the information in the council action form, council had directed staff to submit the application. We did do that. With the REAP grant, there are 3 categories: small, medium, and large. We're in the large category, which means we can get a maximum amount of $200,000. And I will say there were 30 plus applications that were submitted across the 3 categories, and our application actually scored the best out of those 30 plus applications. So really, we're just looking for council to approve entering into the agreement for the REAP grant in the amount of $200,000, and the money will be used to purchase the land out on Ontario Street for a future park.
Wonderful.
Any questions?
No, but that's great work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right.
And I will just real quick just say that thank you to Susan Guiazda, Joshua Thompson, and then also Lisa Hine from the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation with their assistance in putting the application together and submitting it. So good work from the team.
Okay. All right. Open up public input. Anybody want to address council? See none. Close public input. Entertain a motion and resolution approving entering into resource enhancement and protection grant agreement with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources in the amount of $200,000.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call.
Aye.
Rollins. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Keith.
Good. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Item number 24, hearing on proposal to enter into a water revenue loan disbursement agreement. I see Mr. Dunn is not going to even come up front.
A few words.
Any questions for Mr. Dunn on this one? All right. Declare a public hearing on a proposal to enter into a water revenue loan and disbursement agreement to be open. Does anyone want to address council on this topic? Seeing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution taking additional action on proposal to enter into a water revenue loan and disbursement agreement for new water wells.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Item 25, sewer revenue loan and disbursement agreement. Any questions for Mr. Dunn on this one? Seeing none, declare public hearing on a proposal to enter into a sewer revenue loan and disbursement agreement to be open. Does anyone want to address council on this item? Seeing none, declare public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution taking additional action on proposal to enter into a sewer revenue loan and disbursement agreement for the annual sanitary sewer system improvement program, which includes FY 2018/19, 2019/20, 2020/2021, and 2021/2022.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you. All right. We have next item 26 regarding the first passage ordinance amending the municipal code regarding the election of hospital trustees, terms of office, and qualification. Mark's here to answer any questions you might have. Any questions for him? Open up public comment. Does anyone in the audience wish to address council on this item? Seeing none, close public comment. Entertain motion on first passage of ordinance to amend municipal code of the city of Ames, Iowa by amending chapter 12, section 12.2 and 12.3 for the purpose of establishing election of hospital trustees, term of office, and qualifications.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, item 27, entertain a motion on third passage and adoption of ordinance number 4482, rezoning of 3700 through 5898 East Lincoln Way, 799 Teller Avenue, and 220 and 420 South Avenue from agriculture A to intensive industrial.
Move on third.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. All right, moving on to disposition of communications of council. We have one email from Kurt Friedrich regarding zoning limitations at 320 Jewel Drive.
So this has to do with the program of work for Kelly, I believe. So I think if you want us to proceed with this, we need to get a memo from Kelly to see how you want to prioritize this particular project along with the other things you already assigned him. So you'd ask for a memo if you want us to proceed with this at this time.
Would it take a very big memo to just get us update on this?
Oh. And how about
I'll move for a memo.
Second.
okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, council comments. Gloria, we'll start with you tonight.
I hope everyone has a happy Thanksgiving with family and friends.
Thank you. Tim?
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
Anita?
Nothing tonight, thanks.
Thank you.
Nothing for me.
I was going to say happy Thanksgiving as well, and that after the National League of Cities conference, I have some ideas that I've been sitting with, and I hope to share those with you guys soon.
Very good.
Nothing for me tonight. Thank you.
All right. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.